The screen hung over the stage like a second moon, and a whole pavilion of beautiful people had forgotten how to breathe. 2 words, held in the dark and refused to move. Unaired material. I stood at the back with my hands in my pockets, the only man in the room who already knew what came next. That is the funny thing about a reveal. Everyone watches the screen, nobody ever watches the husband. Ladies and gentlemen, Dorian said into the mic, his showman voice cracking at the edges. What you are about to see was never meant to air. He had hosted weddings and game shows for years, and tonight he looked afraid of his own stage. Mireille found my face across the crowd. Her smile was still pinned in place, but her fingers had drifted to her wrists, to the thin bracelet there, turning it around and around like a worry bead. Hold that picture for me. The bracelet, her hand, the screen above them both. We will come back to it. To understand how a quiet man ended up on his feet while everyone else sat frozen, you have to rewind 3 months. It starts at a party where I was treated like a coat that could walk. A corporate gala for the Alma Mia group, where I was Mireille's +1, which in practice meant I carried her clutch and nodded at strangers. My wife worked the room like it owed her rent. I work the wall. I am good at the wall. You see things from there. Who laughs too hard? Who watches the exits? Which man with real power checks the door? I had read rooms like this long before Mireille knew my surname carried weight. She had forgotten it did. Ren Amamiya arrived the way money arrives, late, loud, and forgiven for both. He was Mireille's CEO, her mentor, her complicated friendship, and tonight he carried a small velvet box like a man delivering a verdict instead of a gift. For our brightest, he announced, and clasped a slim gold bracelet around her wrist with his own hands, fingers lingering a beat too long. A present you fasten yourself is never really a present. It is a leash with better marketing. Ren, it's too much, Mireille breathed, which in her language meant please keep going. He waved it off like loose change. Nothing is too much for the woman carrying my entire campaign. Then his eyes slid to me. The way you glance at furniture you are thinking of replacing. I lifted my glass an inch off the tray. Generous, I said, just the one word. I learned long ago that a single dry word lands cleaner than any speech. Mireille steered me into a quiet corner before I could smudge her painting. Haruto, you look exhausted. Why don't you head home? The dog hasn't been walked, and you hate these things anyway. I do hate these things, I agreed because it was true and because agreeing is faster, so go. She smoothed my collar, a tenderness aimed entirely at the room watching us. I'll handle the rest of the night. I was certain she would. I collected my coat from a stranger's hand and left my wife at a party with the man who fastened jewelry onto her in public. Getting sent home by your own wife, it turns out, feels less like a marriage and more like a shift ending at coat check. From the lobby, I caught them slipping toward the elevators instead of the doors. A hotel corridor swallowed them whole. Somewhere above me, a door I would never open clicked shut. I drove home and walked the dog, who at least had the grace to look guilty about something. 2 days later, I sat across a glass desk from the only person in my life who never performs. My mother, Reiko Kurosawa, slid a folder toward me the way a surgeon lays out instruments, edge squared to the table. Photographs, a hotel receipt, a half-minute clip from a service camera, she said. Every one of them dated. Look at the dates, Haruto, and then try telling me again that you are imagining it. I looked. The receipt ran warmer than my marriage, and it held fewer feelings than my mother's desk. That is the family I come from. We do not weep, we reconcile accounts. Grief, for us, has always arrived in spreadsheets. You already knew, she said. It was not a question. I suspected, I answered. Suspecting is cheaper than knowing. It also lets a man keep some dignity in front of his own mother, then stop spending that dignity covering for her. Reiko folded her hands into a single calm shape. You have spent 8 years making her excuses sound like loyalty. I am tired of watching it. I can offer you a different room, she went on. One where she makes her own choices with the lights on, where I decide what gets recorded and what is ever seen. Or you keep walking the dog. Your call, as always. I did not ask what room she meant. With my mother, you learn that the fewer questions you ask, the more she trusts you to carry. The divorce papers, she added, were already drafted and sitting in a drawer. Across the city, the room was busy selling itself. In Ren's penthouse, a television ad bloomed across one whole wall. A private island, strangers and couples, sunlight and rivalry. A single luxury reality show with one rule stamped in gold. No phones. No contact with the outside world. An island, Mireille said, folding herself into his side. You and me, cameras in every palm tree. The entire industry watching Amamiya's golden pair shine. Ren did not look up from his drink. It's a children's program with expensive lighting. It's a relaunch. She knew exactly which word he answered to. It is more than money, Ren. It is the story they tell about you afterward. The ruthless leader who turned out to be human. People vote for that. People follow that. His boredom thawed into appetite right in front of her. Ego is the easiest door in the world to walk through. You never have to pick the lock. You simply say the word validation out loud and the man opens it himself. And the husband? Ren asked, already smiling at an obstacle he had decided long ago was nothing. Mireille twisted the new bracelet on her wrist. Haruto stays home. He's very good at staying home. She came back that night glowing with a plan she believed was entirely her own. I was on the living room floor with the dog, pretending the floor was simply where I lived now. She knelt to scratch behind his ears, so she would not have to meet my eyes. There's a show, she said to the dog. An island, a few weeks, no phones allowed. It's enormous for my career, and someone has to stay behind with him. She nodded down at the animal as if he were a clause in a contract she had already signed. Someone has to stay with the dog, I repeated, flat. You're so good with him. She kissed my forehead, the exact kiss you give a reliable appliance before a trip. A few weeks, that's all. You'll barely notice I'm gone. That was the real trouble. I had stopped noticing some time ago. I handed her the words she had come home to collect. Go, I've got him. She lit up, relieved, and went to pack before I could find a second sentence. The dog gazed up at me with absolute confidence in a plan he understood nothing about. Honestly, the animal had better escape logistics than I did. He at least knew the precise moment to walk out of a room and let the humans embarrass themselves. The night she zipped her suitcases, I made one phone call from the balcony. The dog, I told my mother. Hire someone for him. The best you can find, whatever it costs. A pause on the line. Already done, Reiko said. And the other matter you raised? Put me on the manifest. I watched the city breathe in the dark below me. If my wife wants an island full of cameras and no way to call for help, the least I can do is round out the cast. My mother did not laugh. She simply said, it's handled, and hung up. A week later, a white yacht idled at a private dock, gleaming like a clean tooth. Contestants boarded in linen and nerves, and Dorian greeted each of them with the same enormous rented laugh. Mireille swept up the gangway on Ren's arm, sunglasses down, certainty rolling off her like heat off asphalt. This is the easy part, Ren told her, pitching it loud enough to perform. A few weeks of smiling for the lens. The useful husbands always wait at home, you know. The clever ones learn to make themselves convenient and stay out of the frame. Convenient, I said from the deck behind him. That's the exact word I was reaching for. Ren turned. The smile stayed on his face a full second after his eyes had already abandoned it, like a light left on in an empty house. Mireille's hand shot to her wrist and yanked her sleeve down over the bracelet, hiding the gift like a shoplifter caught at the door. Haruto, her voice climbed half an octave. What, the dog? Who is with the dog? He's covered. Better staff than the two of us deserve. I nodded toward the rail and the shrinking shore. You said the cameras love a human story. I thought I would come and give them one myself. Behind her, Ren's jaw worked on a sentence and found nothing worth saying. Dorian glided over beaming, and that man could smell drama the way a shark reads a swimmer. Our final passenger. Wonderful, and right on schedule. He clapped his hands once. That means we are all aboard, which brings us to the moment every one of you has been quietly dreading. A steward came down the line carrying a black lacquered box. One after another, the phones went in. Mireille's, Ren's, mine, last. The lid came down with a small, expensive final click that I felt more than heard. From this moment, Dorian announced, arms wide, no calls, no messages, no escape hatch. Out here, the island decides who you really are when no one can rescue you. Beneath our feet, the engines woke and the dock began to slide away. Ren leaned in close, voice low and smooth again. The public smile screwed back on for the lenses. Whatever you think you're doing, husband, you are badly out of your depth. I kept my eyes on the vanishing shore and the last bar of signal dying with it. Maybe I am, I said, but you just handed your phone to a stranger, and I gave away nothing I'll miss. The land thinned to a pale line. 2 weeks. no exits. Every camera already running. For the first time in 8 years, my wife could not leave the room before the truth caught up to her. The island came up out of the sea like a postcard that wanted something from you. White sand, green hills, a villa built from more glass than wall. Paradise always looks free until somebody hands you the fine print. The fine print was a black box on the dock with our phones sealed inside it. Dorian stood beside it like a priest guarding a coffin, arms spread, sunglasses the size of saucers. "Welcome," he boomed at us, "to the place where every mask comes off." I nearly laughed at that. We had surrendered our phones to a steward and kept our faces exactly where they were. From the rail, I watched the cast spill onto the sand, each one already auditioning for a role they were sure the cameras would adore. A staffer in a clipped gray shirt walked the line, counting heads, calm as a metronome. Mika Hayazi, production lead. She never smiled for the lens, and she watched that locked phone box, the way you watch a fire you lit on purpose and now have to manage. "One villa for the men, one for the women," she said, voice flat as a ledger, "and one rule that sits above the rest. What happens out here stays out here until we decide it doesn't." A door marked production breathed cold air behind her, and a wall of small, bright screens flickered for half a second before it sealed. I filed it away. Somebody on this island was always watching, and it was not the audience at home. My mother kept a phrase for rooms like this: lights on, doors locked, a record of everything. I had walked into one of her rooms wearing flip-flops and a tourist's smile. The villa tour blurred past in marble and ocean glare. Then they sat us at a long driftwood table for the first shared meal, the sun bleeding orange over the water, and the real auditions opened. A man in a cream linen suit shot up before Dorian could even raise his glass. "Friends, as a professional host of more than 300 weddings, allow me to break the ice properly." Renji Kuroda had decided the island needed a second master of ceremonies and had generously nominated himself for the job. Dorian's grin thinned to a paper cut. I drank my water and thought that a wedding host loose on an island is just a pirate with a seating chart, and somehow more dangerous near an open bar. He would be useful later. Loud men always are. "Sit down, Glitter," said a girl across from him, not bothering to look up. Rina Tsubaki, sun-browned and blunt, built like she patched her own roof in the rain. "Some of us came here to win the prize, not to watch you rehearse your toast." The influencer beside her was angling her chin against the sunset and losing the fight. "Whoever lit this island deserves to be fired," Erika Shirasaki declared, tilting a serving spoon to study her own reflection. "This light adds 10 years and subtracts every follower I have ever earned. Drink from the green ones, never the brown ones." A local man was stacking coconuts at the end of the table, like a soldier stacking shells. Kaido Higa spoke in small transactions, each sentence priced and final. "Brown ones I sell to tourists for too much. Green ones keep you breathing. Pick your friends the same way, eh?" A mountain of a man 2 seats down raised his hand with the earnestness of a schoolboy. "Quick question," said Daiki Moriyama, all shoulders and open heart. "Is there a protein situation on this island? Because a body is a promise you make to yourself, and I am not a man who breaks promises." The table went quiet, and he nodded as if the silence had agreed with him. "This whole place is cursed," whispered a pale young man, hugging a bottle of sunscreen like a rosary. Yuto Maruyama had clearly been reading the wrong corners of the internet. "My mother warned me. She said these shows harvest your soul through the contract. And I signed the contract. I think I signed it twice." "Then quit reading and start floating," Rina told him flatly. And to everyone's surprise, he relaxed, comforted in a way he could not have explained to a judge. At the calm center of the chaos sat a man in a wheelchair, hands folded, studying us the way a chess coach studies children who think they are good. "Fascinating," Satoru Kanzaki murmured, half to himself. "Not one course served, and I can already name who breaks first. True growth begins the moment you stop hiding your own cracks." His eyes drifted to Yuto and softened into something that looked like kindness. "You, for instance, are braver than your mother believes." Yuto melted with gratitude. I made a note. A man who hands out free confidence is always charging interest somewhere you cannot see. A gentle girl beside him pressed a hand to her chest, eyes wet with the sunset. "I think it's beautiful," Aoi Hanamura breathed. "Strangers, an island, maybe even real love. The kind that arrives when you have stopped waiting for it." Half the table believed her completely. The other half began quietly to plan how to spend her. Then the youngest of us spoke, and the chatter actually stopped. "Or," said Natsumi Seto, 18 and sharp as a fresh scalpel, "this is a controlled environment engineered to reward whoever lies most convincingly on camera." Statistically, the warmest person at any table is the one to watch. She buttered her bread. No offense to the lovebirds. I liked her at once, which on this island was probably a tactical error. I decided to make it anyway. Smart witnesses are worth more than friendly ones, and she was the first person here who counted before she trusted. Through all of it, two people worked hardest at looking relaxed. My wife sat with her spine drawn straight, laughing precisely on cue, and Ren Amamiya wore his boardroom smile like sunscreen, reapplying a fresh coat every time a camera drifted within range of his jaw. I took the open seat beside Mireille. Her hand went straight to the bracelet at her wrist, turning it, the way frightened people reach for a cross they stopped believing in. "You're really here," she murmured, smile bolted on for the lens. "I'm really here," I said, and reached past her for a green coconut. Dorian felt the table tilting toward something tender and pounced like a man who reads ratings in his sleep. Now, the question every viewer at home is dying to ask. He swept both arms toward us. "You two arrived together, so tell the island, what exactly are we all looking at here?" The whole table leaned in. Mireille's laugh landed a half-beat late. Under the driftwood, her foot pressed down hard on mine, a warning in Morse. I let the quiet stretch one polite second, the way you let a door swing wide before deciding whether to hold it open. "She's my wife," I said. Plain, true, and far heavier than it sounded out loud. Ioe gasped right on schedule. Renji actually applauded. Mireille's shoulders dropped a careful centimeter as relief arrived ahead of its evidence. 8 years married, I added, which on a show full of strangers makes us the boring couple in the corner. A scatter of laughter. Mireille settled into it, certain now. She believed I had just closed a door. In truth, I had only found the handle and tested the weight. Dorian, scenting blood and loving it, twisted the blade for the broadcast, and the famous Ren Amamiya, old friends, business partners, you all swim in the same glittering pool, surely. I looked at Ren for exactly as long as it takes to make a confident man check his own collar. "Ren," I said, "is someone I only recently started learning about." Light tone. No accusation anywhere in it. Just a sentence with a small hook buried in the soft part where nobody thinks to search. The table did not laugh this time. Satoru's eyes brightened with the pleasure of a man watching a good opening move. Natsumi stopped chewing entirely. Erika narrowed her gaze over the rim of her glass and filed the moment somewhere under interesting. Ren's smile stayed wide and polished, and it quietly stopped reaching his eyes. "He's far too kind," he said, smooth as poured glass. "We barely know one another." 3 separate lies balanced in 5 short words, and only the clever half of the table felt the tower sway. Mireille twisted the bracelet hard enough that the clasp must have bitten her skin. "Haruto adores a dramatic pause," she said, too brightly by half. "He's always been the quiet, jealous type. Rationalize, reframe, redirect." She was genuinely gifted at it, with 8 years of practice, most of it on me. That was the entire move, and it was enough. I had pointed at no one and named no crime. I had simply lifted Ren a few inches away from the furniture, in front of every witness on the island, and let a room full of strangers wonder why the boring husband kept watching the CEO. The party opened after dinner, because of course it did. Strung lights, a pool glowing the exact green of antifreeze, and music engineered to help expensive people forget the contracts they had signed that morning. To me, it sounded like a soundtrack for adults pretending not to commit small crimes in swimwear. Erika raised a champagne flute, discovered a hairline crack running up the rim, and held it aloft like a prosecutor with an exhibit. "Even the glasses here are pretending to be whole," she announced. For a vain woman, she had an unkind genius for the truth. The crack caught the light, and Mireille looked away from it very quickly. Across the deck, Ren drifted toward my wife with the casual gravity of a man who always gets the private word he wants. A camera operator slid neatly between them, lens up, and Ren had to convert his approach into a stretch and a yawn. On an island with no phones and no shadows, even a CEO has to wait his turn behind the equipment. Mireille reached me first and threaded her cold fingers through mine for the cameras. "Dance with your wife," she said, the bracelet glinting in the gap between our hands. Behind her, Ren watched her fingers lace through mine, and his jaw did a slow, ugly thing before the smile clamped firmly back into place. I gave her one slow turn under the lights, because refusing would have made a scene, and I never spend a scene I don't own. "You're enjoying this," she breathed against my shoulder. "You think you've caught something." I kept my face soft and unbothered. "I'm enjoying the music," I said. "It's remarkably honest for a party this full of liars." Natsumi watched the whole performance from a deck chair, nursing a soda she had no intention of drinking. When the turn ended, she crossed the tiles and stopped in front of me with the bluntness only the young can afford. "You're not jealous," she said quietly. "Jealous men stare at the woman. You keep watching the man. That's a different thing entirely." "And what thing is that?" I asked. She studied me, unhurried, the way Satoru studied everyone, except hers was free. Patience, she decided, the dangerous kind. "I'll be over there when the adults stop lying." She wandered off toward the coconuts, leaving me with the unsettling comfort of being understood by a teenager. Dorian climbed onto the lip of the pool deck and clapped for silence, beaming like a man about to wreck a honeymoon for sport. "One last announcement, and it is my personal favorite." He let the pause swell. "On this island, the gentlemen sleep in one villa and the ladies in the other. Sweet dreams, lovebirds." The cast groaned and laughed and threw pool noodles. Mirei's smile turned to plaster. Separate villas meant she and Ren would pass the night under different roofs, both of them suddenly, painfully aware of every camera between here and sunrise. Her hand found the bracelet one final time. I drained the last of my coconut and went to find my bed, the only man on the whole island who slept that night without a single thing to hide. The party burned down to its embers the way parties do. The music softening, the lights surrendering one string at a time. People drifted toward the two villas with the loose walk of strangers who have decided they are already friends. I walked at the back, where I do my best work. Ahead of me, the cast traded the easy lies of a first night, and somewhere in that warm noise, my wife was already planning her exit from it. The men's villa was a comedy waiting for an audience. Daiki was doing slow push-ups on the cool tile to lock in the gains before sleep. Renji had appointed himself in charge of the lights and could not locate a single switch. Then the island made a sound outside, a low warble in the dark, and Yuto sat bolt upright under his mosquito net. "Did you hear that? That is not a normal bird. That is a bird with a grudge." He clutched his sunscreen, the way other men clutch a passport in a bad country. From the women's side, through the open shutters, Natsumi's flat voice carried across the garden. "It's a nightjar, Yuto. The only thing dangerous on this island walks on two legs and signed a release form." She did not raise her volume. She never has to. "But does the bird have legal authority over the island?" Yuto asked the ceiling, genuinely. Kaito answered, without opening his eyes. "Everything on this island has more authority than you, friend. Sleep." I almost liked it here. Almost. In the women's villa, the lights burned longer. Through the shutters, I could hear Erika cataloging everyone's flaws like a buyer at an auction, Rina telling her to close the window, and Aoi defending each victim in turn, which only lengthened the list. Satoru rolled himself quietly along the path between the two villas before curfew, handing out small gifts of insight. He told Daiki his discipline was wasted on muscle, and told Yuto his fear was secretly wisdom. By morning, both would feel they owed him something. That is how the calm ones build a kingdom, one free compliment at a time. Across the garden, the women's villa glowed and then dimmed. I caught a glimpse of Mirei at the window, brushing out her hair, performing tiredness for anyone who might be watching. She was very good at performing tiredness. I had bought it for 8 years. Earlier, leaving the pool, she had brushed past Ren in the narrow kitchen corridor, where the cameras hang highest and notice least. 2 words, barely a breath, summer shower. Then she was gone, and Ren stood a moment too long pretending to study a fruit bowl. I saw the shape of it, without needing the sound. A man does not memorize the service paths on his first afternoon unless he is bored, lonely, or hunting. Ren had not looked bored once since we boarded. A year ago, I would have followed. I would have stood in the dark counting my own humiliation, then forgiven it before breakfast, and called that love. My mother had cured me of the habit with a single sentence. "Before you take anything back," she said, "first take back the part of you that begs." Here is the part where the jealous husband follows, where he creeps along the hedges, catches them, makes a scene, and hands everyone a villain to pity. Instead, I poured a glass of water, carried it out to the pool, and sat in a deck chair facing the black water. If my wife wanted to walk into the night, she could walk. I was finished chasing things that had already left. Let the island do the watching. It was better equipped for it than I was. The lights went fully down. A shutter on the women's villa eased open without a sound, and a thin figure slipped into the garden, bare feet on warm stone. Moonlight caught the bracelet at her wrist and threw a small cold spark across the lawn. Then she was gone toward the service zone, where the summer showers stand for rinsing salt off skin. What happened next? The audience at home never saw. So let me show you the way I eventually came to know it, frame by frame, the way the island recorded it, whether or not the island ever meant to share. Past the linen carts and the spare gas canisters, at the property's dark edge, a single shower hissed to life. Two silhouettes met under it, careful and quiet, hands finding shoulders. A kiss held a beat longer than friendship permits. No words worth broadcasting, just enough to end a marriage in any room that mattered. Above them, screwed into a service post nobody bothers to decorate, a small maintenance camera blinked its one red eye. It belonged to a quieter system than the show feed, and it did not blink because it was surprised. Cameras are never surprised. That is the entire point of them. In a cool room behind the door marked production, the picture surfaced on one screen among many. Mika Hayase watched the silhouettes without expression, then reached for her headset. "We have something on the service line," she said. "Two of them, and it's clear. Do I cut it into tonight's edit, or does it go live?" The answer came in a voice that refused to hurry, a woman somewhere off the island who owned more of it than the palm trees did. "Neither," Reiko Kurosawa said. "Nothing like this airs, not one frame. Label it and archive it." A pause followed, precise as a drawer sliding shut. "Off air, on file. We hold it until it is worth more than a cheap scandal." On Mika's screen, a folder yawned open and the clip slid inside. The label read, "Unaired Material." She watched it save, muted the line, and went back to making the public show look like a holiday. The first irreversible thing had happened on this island, and exactly two people who were not in the shower knew that it had. Mika did not enjoy it. You could read it in the set of her jaw, the careful way she squared the new folder against the others already waiting in the dark. Her whole job ran on knowing things the cast did not, and she had filed a great many secrets on this island. This was the first one with a husband sleeping 100 steps away. Under the dripping water, the man was already thinking past the moment. "In the morning," Ren murmured, fixing her collar with the same hands that had clipped on the bracelet, "stay close to your husband. Smile at him. Boring is the best cover money cannot buy. Strategy, not affection." He had not come for her. He had come for the version of himself that takes what quieter men manage to keep, just to prove the quiet men were fools to keep it. Mireille nodded against his shoulder, then crossed back through the dark, checking her wrist once, turning the bracelet so its glint faced inward where the cameras she knew about could not reach it. She never checked the post by the linen carts. Nobody ever does. I was still by the pool when she came back. I heard her before I saw her, the soft slap of damp feet, cheap service soap layered over expensive perfume. She stopped when she found me sitting there in the dark, and for one honest second, neither of us bothered to pretend. "You're awake," she said. Not a question, an accusation hunting for a target. "Couldn't sleep," I answered, tipping my glass toward the water. "They sold us paradise and delivered insomnia. Better landscaping, though." She let out a small, relieved laugh. She decided, right there, that I was simply sad. A sad husband by a pool is a comfortable thing to be married to. He asks for nothing but a little guilt you can carry without spilling any. "Go to bed, Haruto," she said, almost gently. "You look pathetic out here." The bracelet glinted as she patted my shoulder and went inside. I sat a while longer. I had not caught them, and I did not need to. I had watched my wife leave dry and return rinsed, leave certain and return careful. And I had memorized the whole shape of the lie without laying a finger on it. The island remembered better than I ever could. I had decided to trust its memory. It is a strange kind of power, doing nothing on purpose. Every instinct I owned wanted to stand and make noise. I sat on my hands and let the silence work, because noise was the one thing they had braced for, and patience was the single weapon neither of them had thought to survive. Morning arrived loud and innocent, the way mornings on television always do. Sunlight, smoothies, Daiki counting reps, Erica declaring open war on the humidity and her own hair. The night before had been scrubbed off the public show as clean as salt off skin. Mireille found me at breakfast and held my hand across the table, warm and performative, exactly as instructed the night before. I let her. A man who knows where the proof lives can afford to hold a liar's hand in the sunshine. It costs him nothing he has not already lost. Across the table, Ren watched the little performance and approved of it. He liked me best like this, domestic and dim. a prop that proved he had chosen the more interesting life. I let him keep the thought. It was cheap to give and would be expensive to take back. Then Dorian swept in, wearing a captain's hat he had not earned, clapping for the room. "Lovebirds, castaways, and whatever Yuto is," he announced. "Wake up properly, because your first game begins within the hour." He grinned around the table. "We call it the Coconut Run. Bring your competitive spirit and possibly your dignity." The table reacted exactly to type. Daiki flexed and announced it was destiny. Renji volunteered to commentate and was ignored by everyone with a pulse. Erika asked whether the coconuts were photogenic. Yuto asked whether anyone had ever died doing this, and looked unsatisfied by the silence that answered him. Ren played his role without a seam, draping charm over the whole room until it forgot he mattered in any way worth watching. He even clapped me on the shoulder. The boring husband, the safe scenery. "Stay close to your husband," he had told her in the dark. He was the one staying close, and only one of us understood the joke. Natsumi caught my eye over her juice and tipped her head a fraction toward Mirei's damp hairline, then toward Ren, who was busy being charming at the far end of the table. She said nothing. She did not need to. We were the only two people at breakfast doing arithmetic, and we had both already reached the same total. The game field was a stretch of cleared sand between the villa and the tree line, 2 empty baskets waiting at the finish, and a forest stuffed with coconuts in between. Dorian stood on a crate in a hat with too much braid, explaining rules nobody fully absorbed. "It is gloriously simple," he beamed. "You compete in pairs. You and your partner gather as many coconuts as you can before the horn. Most coconuts wins a reward. The fewest performs a forfeit. Live. For the people at home who love watching the mighty fall." Yuto raised a trembling hand. "Are the coconuts dangerous? One tried to kill me this morning." "I have reason to believe it was personal," Dorian assured him. The coconuts harbored no grudges. Yuto did not look convinced, and somewhere in his anxious little mind, a plan involving a camera was already taking shape. "Choose your partners wisely," Dorian went on, eyes glittering. "Choose them romantically. Choose them strategically. Choose them for ratings. I won't judge." He clapped. "Pair up." The scramble that followed told you everything about who these people were. Rina grabbed Daiki by the arm before he finished flexing, locking in the obvious power team. Aoi looked around hopefully until Satoru rolled up beside her and offered his partnership as an experiment in trust, which made her glow and made me uneasy on her behalf. Then Mirei crossed the sand, took my hand in both of hers, and turned us toward the cameras like a couple cutting a ribbon at the opening of their own marriage. "I choose my husband," she announced, voice pitched for the back row. "We're a team. We've always been a team." The crowd made the warm sound crowds make at a lie that flatters them. To my left, Ren's jaw did its slow, ugly work before the smile clicked back into place. He had planned to drift to her side like he drifted everywhere, and now he stood watching another man get handed the role he believed he had already bought. "When your wife calls you a team on national television," a small, dry voice in me observed, "it is wise to check whether the opposing team is hiding behind a palm tree." I smiled for the lens and squeezed her fingers. Her free hand went, just for a second, to the bracelet on her wrist, the way it always did when she was about to spend my trust. Dorian assigned the leftovers with the joy of a man stirring a pot he did not have to clean. Ren got Erika, who studied him like a parking ticket she intended to dispute. Yuto got Kaito, which guaranteed one of them would survive the forest and the other would narrate it. Natsumi ended up partnered with a cameraman, which suited her since she trusted equipment more than people. "So this is how it works at your company too, I imagine," Erika told Ren, inspecting her nails. "The boss takes the credit while some invisible person does the actual carrying." She smiled with her teeth. "Today I'm the invisible person. Do try to keep up." Ren's polished laugh came out a half size too small for his face. I had quietly decided one thing while everyone postured. I was going to win this stupid game, not for the reward and not for Mirei. I wanted the scoreboard to say, in numbers no one could spin, exactly who had done the work and who had wandered off. Numbers make excellent witnesses. They never get nervous on the stand. Natsumi drifted past me, frowning at the trees. "Pairs stay together the whole run. That's the rule," she said. Low, to no one, and entirely to me, just so we're all clear before anybody gets creative in there. She moved off before I could thank her for confirming a suspicion I had already filed. Then Mirei leaned in, lips near my ear, and for one foolish heartbeat, I half expected something tender. "North Trail," she breathed. "Not to me. past me. 3 pairs over, Ren tilted his head a fraction to show the message had landed. The horn blew, and paradise turned into a foot race. Here is what the public broadcast showed its millions. A bright, chaotic stampede of beautiful people charging into a forest after fruit. Daiki hoisting Rina onto his shoulders to strip a high cluster while she barked directions like a foreman. Yuto sprinting in the wrong direction from a crab that had taken offense to his ankles. Kaido calmly negotiating with the crab. I worked my own patch with the boring efficiency of a man who once assembled wardrobes from a folded diagram. Reach, twist, drop, repeat. No theatrics and no audience required. Across the clearing, Satoru could not climb a single trunk, so he talked Aioi up each tree with warm encouragement and collected half her harvest as a modest teaching fee. Erika, abandoned by her partner, gathered precisely nothing. Instead, she filmed a slow, wounded monologue about being left to do everything alone. And for a woman betrayed by a fruit quota, she performed the heartbreak with genuine range. Natsumi and her cameraman recorded all of it without comment. 2 professionals stranded in a field of amateurs. Good television. Clean television. Here is what the broadcast did not show, because the show cameras chased the crab and the comedy, and the quiet trails belonged to a quieter system that answered to my mother. Deep on the North Trail, away from the crew, Mireille stopped gathering coconuts and started walking with purpose. I was 100 steps back, filling my basket at a steady, unglamorous pace, because somebody on this team intended to actually win, and because a man who looks busy is the easiest man in the world to slip away from. I will admit the one thing the cameras could never catch. It stung. Not the leaving, I was long past the leaving. It was how cheap it still was for her, how little she had to spend to walk away from me, like a coin she had stopped bothering to check for in her pocket. I let it sting, then I let it pass, and I kept filling the basket. We should divide and search, she had told me before she went, already moving off. We'll cover twice the ground that way. I had reminded her, mildly, that the rules wanted partners to stay together. She had laughed at me. Don't be so literal, Haruto. It's a game. Marriage rules had always been negotiable. Coconut rules, it turned out, were where she finally located her freedom. What she did not know, what none of them knew, was that earlier that morning, Yuto had strapped his little action camera to a low branch on the North Trail. He had become convinced that a dangerous coconut had ambushed him there, and he wanted, in his exact words, evidence for the authorities. The authorities were about to receive a great deal more than fruit. He had told Kaito the whole tragic saga that morning, demanding a camera be posted as a witness against the fruit. Kaito had listened with enormous patience, sold him a green coconut at a markup, and advised him to fear the people on this island long before its produce. Then, he forgot the camera entirely, the way you forget a small thing that is quietly about to rearrange several lives. The camera blinked its small red light at an empty trail. Then 2 people walked into its frame. Mireille arrived first, breathing hard, glancing back the way she had come. Ren approached from the other direction, having abandoned Erika to the invisible person labor he so admired in other men. Quick, he's not far, Mireille whispered. He's collecting coconuts, like it's a salaried position. Ren caught her wrist, the same gold bracelet. Then let him, he murmured against her hair. Your husband is exactly where useful husbands belong. Behind you, carrying things, never once looking up. It was a brief thing, a glance, a quick kiss, a hand at the small of her back, every frame of it caught dead center by a teenager's camera meant to indict a coconut. Mireille wiped the sweat from her wrist, smearing the bracelet, and hurried back toward the trail she had come from. Ren went the opposite way, already reassembling his face for the crowd. The light kept blinking after they left. Cameras are patient like that. They hold whatever you hand them and ask for nothing in return, and they never forget where the bodies were buried, even when the body in question is only a marriage that has not been told it is dead yet. I stepped out of the trees from the south with a full basket, and I watched my wife emerge from the north and Ren emerge, a careful beat later, from the west. 3 directions, 1 trail, and no coincidence that survives a second look from a sober man. I said nothing. I had a basket to weigh and a face to keep on straight. The walk back to the field was where she expected the old husband to reappear, the one who carried the bags and smoothed the silences, who made her version of any story the official one simply by agreeing with it fast enough. I had retired that man somewhere between the yacht and the pool, and I had not yet found a reason to bring him back. Help me. These roots are everywhere, Mireille called, picking her her way down the trail with one careful eye on me. I had a basket stacked high in both arms with a loose coconut riding the top of the pile, and I was watching that coconut far more closely than I was watching her, which is the only fully honest part of what happened next. She reached for my arm at the exact moment the trail dipped. The top coconut rolled, I shifted to save it, my elbow swung wide and the fruit thumped off her shoulder and dropped her into the soft sand on her backside. Marriage counseling, I reflected, had never been this tropical, or frankly, this heavy. Haruto, she sat in the dirt, astonished, one hand thrown up toward me, waiting for the reflex that had answered her call for 8 straight years. Help me up. People are watching. The reflex did not come. I stood there holding 2 armfuls of the work she had skipped, and I let the silence finish its sentence. My hands are full, I said, calm, almost gentle. You'll have to stand up by yourself. Not cruel, whatever she decided to tell herself later, only true. A man can carry just so much, and I had finally chosen what I was willing to set down in the sand and leave there. She climbed up alone, furious, slapping sand off her shorts and scrubbing dirt from the bracelet with her thumb, as if the bracelet were the one thing in the scene that had been wronged. It's a game, she hissed. You're being petty over a stupid game. Far down the field behind her, Ren staggered in empty-handed, his basket a punchline, his lungs a liability. Rina passed us hauling a load that made mine look modest, and she glanced from my full arms to Mirei's empty ones and did the arithmetic without spending a single word on it. Good run, she told me, flat as a board. From Rina, that was practically a coronation. Daiki gave me a thumbs up he meant with the entirety of his enormous heart. Dorian swept in to herd us toward the field, scenting the comedy and missing the autopsy buried underneath it. Marvelous chaos. All of it, he cried. Coconuts gathered, friendships tested, and at least one marriage clearly thriving under pressure. He had no notion of how funny he was, which was most of his charm. Ren limped to the finish and tried to set his empty basket down behind Erica's, as if standing near effort counted as having made some. Erica stepped neatly aside and let his nothing sit alone in the sand. Carry your own credit for once, she said, pitched for the lenses. He had spent the entire run proving her opening joke correct. Mirei recovered the only way she knows, by narrating over the evidence. Haruto gets so competitive. You know how he is, she told Aoi with a fond, forgiving laugh, rebuilding herself in real time as the patient wife of an intense man. Aoi nodded, because Aoi nods. Natsumi, 2 steps away, watched the bracelet and did not. The cast was quietly recalculating, and you could see it move through them like a change in the weather. The boring husband had filled a basket, while the glamorous CEO came back with sweat and excuses. And people who had filed me under harmless were pulling the file to make a small, important correction. Rina said it plainest, the way Rina says everything. Funny, she muttered, nodding at Ren's empty basket and then at mine. The loud ones always come back light. She had no idea what she was actually describing. She only knew the honest weight of a basket, and weight has never once learned how to lie. I carried my basket to the finish and set it down in the sand between Mirei and me, a small, deliberate wall built from the work I would no longer perform for free. The horn sounded the end of the run. Somewhere behind the cameras, a scoreboard was being tallied. And numbers, unlike spouses, never lie about where everybody actually spent their afternoon. The scoreboard stood on a raised platform like an altar, a big screen waiting to deliver a verdict nobody could charm. Dorian made us line up in our pairs while he stretched the suspense past the point of decency, because suspense is the only thing a host actually manufactures. In last place, he announced, and therefore tonight's proud owners of a live forfeit, we have a tie of the truly committed. He named 2 pairs who had spent the run flirting instead of climbing. The forfeit was a synchronized dance. The island laughed. This is the part of the show the public adores, the harmless humiliation that costs nothing. 2 of the guilty pairs performed their forfeit, a synchronized dance executed with the grace of people apologizing to their own knees. The island wept with laughter. Even Mirei laughed, briefly forgetting that she was about to be measured by the same indifferent machine. Kaito and Yuto landed comfortably mid-table, mostly because Kaito had quietly run a small coconut cartel during the chaos, taxing weaker gatherers in exchange for protection from the crab. Yuto had contributed pure terror and 1 camera. On this island, it turned out, that counted as a competitive portfolio. I watched Ren do the math on his own face before Dorian reached him. And 1 rung above disaster, Dorian continued, drawing it out. Our distinguished CEO and his extremely patient partner Ren and Erica. The screen put their basket count up in unforgiving numbers. It was a small number. It was the kind of number that follows a man into meetings. Erica accepted the result like a queen accepting a gift she would later return. Don't blame me, she told the cameras sweetly. I carried for two. It's just that one of us is the CEO of an invisible company. Big title, no product. Never on the floor when the work happens. The cast howled. Ren's smile held and developed a hairline crack right down the middle. It's a children's game, Ren said, with the light tone of a man who has decided not to bleed in public. I let her enjoy it. Nobody believed him, and the worst part was that nobody needed to. The number was already up on the screen, and numbers do not require an audience to be true. No spreadsheet in Ren's entire empire, I thought, had ever judged him as honestly as a basket of fruit. You can edit a quarterly report. You cannot edit a coconut. In a strong second place, Dorian rolled on, carrying what I can only call a heroic individual effort. Haruto and Mireille. Applause, real applause this time, the kind that knows it is rewarding something. A few people clapped while looking only at me, which is its own kind of scoreboard. Mireille stepped into the warmth as if it were addressed to her, hand raised, smile wide. Then she heard the shape of it, the way the clapping bent toward her husband, and her hand drifted to the bracelet and began to turn it. Games don't mean anything, she murmured to Aoi, denial arriving right on schedule. It's all editing and luck anyway. It was not editing. It was a man filling a basket while his partner went for a walk, and everyone with eyes had done that arithmetic. I said nothing to defend her gap, because the old husband used to fill silences like that for free, and he had retired. Let the board talk. The board was more honest than I had been for years. And your winners, Dorian crowed, by a landslide of pure muscle and zero nonsense. Rena and Daiki. Daiki burst into tears and lifted Rena off the ground. Rena endured it for exactly 2 seconds, then patted his head. We won because we worked, she said flatly into the nearest lens. Wild concept. You point at the tree, you take the coconut, you don't wander off. She was not looking at Ren when she said it. She did not have to. Mireille found me in the shuffle afterward and tried to repaint the result while it was still wet. Second place, Haruto. We came second together. She squeezed my arm for the lenses. See? We're still good at this when it matters. You came second, I said. I came second. You came back from a walk. I kept it light, almost fond, the tone you use to hand someone a truth they cannot accuse you of throwing at them. Her smile thinned, recalculated, and stayed up. A few steps away, Natsumi watched the entire exchange and filed it in the notebook she keeps behind her eyes. Across the platform, Renji had been watching Ren's stock drop with the focused interest of a man who buys low. He sidled up beside the diminished CEO and dropped his voice into the register men use for conspiracies. Tough crowd, he said warmly. You and I, though, we understand power. We should talk strategy. Quietly. The right alliance changes everything on an island like this. Ren, bleeding and looking for a tourniquet, did not say no. I drifted close enough to catch the shape of the courtship, because a man should always know who is raising armies near his tent. Renji had the oily patience of a host who has upsold 1,000 grieving brides on a bigger cake. These people respect strength, he murmured. Right now they smell weakness on you, and sharks are simple animals. Pair with me on the votes. I make you look generous. You make me look important. And we quietly decide together who sails home. Ren studied him the way you study a loan with terrible terms when no other bank will return your calls. And what do you get? He said. Renji spread his hands, wounded by the very question. To back a winner, nothing more. I've simply never met a winner who began his season this far behind. It was an insult wearing a handshake. And Ren shook the hand anyway. Drowning men do not inspect the rope. What happened next began, as the best disasters do, with Yuto and a complaint. He marched up to the production tent, clutching his little action camera in both hands, like a man delivering a grenade. I would like to file a report, he announced to a startled assistant. There is a dangerous coconut on the North Trail. It is on this camera. I want it documented, and I want hazard pay. The assistant, unsure of the protocol for fruit-related trauma, took the camera back to be reviewed. For the rest of the hour, Yuto told anyone who would hold still about his ordeal, refining the coconut into a near-lethal projectile with each retelling. By dinner, it had achieved the velocity of a thrown brick and possibly a motive. Nobody corrected him. A frightened man with a good story is the cheapest entertainment a tired cast ever gets. In the cool room behind the door marked production, Mika Hayase scrubbed through Yuto's footage expecting comedy. She found a coconut, an offended crab. And then she found something that made her thumb go still on the dial. 2 people on an empty trail. A whisper, a kiss, a bracelet. She did not call it up on the big monitors. She watched it once on the small one, alone. Then she reached for her headset and the voice that owned the island. The boy's camera caught the North Trail, she said. It's clear, faces, words, all of it. What do you want me to do with it? Watch it once. Then put it away, Reiko Kurosawa said, unhurried as ever. Same folder as the rest. We don't spend proof early, Mika. We save it for the end, when it's worth the most, and they're certain they got away with everything. On the screen, the folder labeled UNAIRED material opened, and a second thumbnail settled in beside the first. 2 clips now. A small, growing library of a marriage being told it was over by everyone except the wife. Mika closed the folder and sat with it a moment. She had worked a dozen of these shows and archived 100 secrets, and she had learned to feel nothing about most of them. This one had a husband on the property who never raised his voice, and somehow that made the folder heavier than its file size. Yuto, blissfully unaware that he had just become the island's finest detective, was told his footage was received and important. He glowed for the rest of the day. The man feared coconuts above all things, and a coconut had repaid him by solving the only crime nobody had reported. It was the island's running joke by sundown. Somewhere in a locked folder, the same joke had a second life that no one on the beach would meet for weeks. I knew both versions, and carrying 2 truths at once was quietly becoming my full-time occupation. The pay was patience. Out on the beach, the social chess went on without me, which is exactly how I like a game I am winning. I watched from a deck chair as Satoru wheeled himself into a slow conversation with Natsumi, his voice doing that warm, surgical thing. You're learning, watching all of them, he told her. Here is a free lesson, since I like you. If you want to know the truth about a person, never watch who they love. Watch who they lie to first. The first lie is always aimed at whoever they're most afraid of losing. He smiled. Fascinating island, isn't it? Natsumi looked at him the way she looked at the nightjar, calmly cataloging a thing that might be dangerous. Free lessons aren't free, she said. You're just billing later. She got up and walked off, and I decided, again, that the smartest person on this island was 18 and trusted no one, including, wisely, the man handing out wisdom from a chair. Second place had bought me something first place never could. First place is a target. Second place, earned by visible work beside visible laziness, is a story the crowd tells itself, and crowds defend the stories they author. I had asked no one to respect me. I had simply let the gap between us sit in plain sun and ripen. The island was conducting my argument for me, and it never tired, never overplayed its hand, and never once resembled revenge. It just kept score, out loud, in front of everyone. Dorian found his mark on the beach as the light went gold and clapped his hands for the cast. Rest those competitive muscles, my darlings, he called, because tomorrow we turn from sport to romance. Tomorrow is the date challenge, and I will be pairing you myself. He grinned at the groans. Oh, you'll hate who you get. That's the entire point. Dorian called it the date challenge, which on this island meant the winners of the last game got to decide who suffered through dinner with whom. Rina and Daiki held the matchmaking pen, and Rina held it like a scalpel. The rules are adorable, Dorian announced. Our champions assign every pair. You will share a date station, a meal, and a conversation the whole nation gets to watch. Choose kindly, champions, or don't. Honestly, don't. Mireille leaned toward Rina with the easy confidence of a woman used to arranging the world. Put me with someone fun, she suggested, smiling. Aoi maybe. We'll have a girls' afternoon. She wanted a soft partner, a mirror that would reflect her well. Rina looked at her the way she looked at a coconut that thought it was special. No, Rina said. That was the entire negotiation. Then she started assigning, and you could feel her doing it on purpose, prying apart everyone who wanted to be comfortable. Haruto, you're with Erika. Mireille, you get Satoru. Ren, you're with Natsumi. She paused, enjoying nothing, which is Rina's version of enjoying something. Renji, take Aoi. Yuto, Kaito, you two deserve each other. Daiki, who had no idea he was anyone's weapon, beamed at his assignment with a near stranger and flexed in greeting. Communication is just emotional weightlifting, he announced. I'm great at reps. Across the sand, Yuto looked at Kaito and visibly grieved. We are going to discuss the coconut again, aren't we? Kaito sighed. Hazard pay, Yuto confirmed, solemn as a widow. The board landed like a series of small accidents. If Rena ever opened a matchmaking service, I thought, half her clients would leave married and the other half would leave honest, and she would refund neither. What Rena had done, without grasping the full reason, was strip the island of every comfortable pair. She separated each person who wanted a soft mirror and handed them a hard one instead. Mireille wanted Aoi and got a vivisectionist. Ren wanted anyone easily impressed and got the one girl on earth immune to being impressed. It was the kindest thing a blunt woman ever did for me, and she did it purely because she hates a coward and loves a fair fight. Ren's smile tightened a single degree when he heard Natsumi's name, the way a man's face tightens at a dentist's drill he is pretending not to hear. Surely a teenager would have more fun with someone her own speed, he tried, smooth as ever. I'd hate to bore the girl with grown-up conversation. I'll cope, Natsumi said, already writing in her notebook. I find grown-ups fascinating. They behave like badly written characters. All the motivation happens off the page, and then they act surprised when no one believes the dialogue. Ren laughed politely. It cost him something to do it. Mirei's reaction was quieter and more telling. When Satoru's name was paired with hers, her right hand slid over the bracelet on her left wrist, covering it without thinking, the way you cover a bruise before someone asks about it. Satoru noticed. Satoru notices everything, free of charge, then sends the bill later. Lovely, Dorian crowed, oblivious. Take your stations, find your light, fall in love or fall apart. The cameras don't care which. I walked down the sand to a little table set against the sea, where Erica was already waiting, reapplying a lipstick that did not need it, and I sat down across from the most honest, superficial person I have ever met. Erica studied me over the rim of a coconut cup for a long moment before she spoke, which is rare for her. She narrates her own life like a director's commentary. The silence meant she was actually looking. Here's the thing about me, she said finally. Everyone decides I'm stupid because I care about lighting and followers. They're half right. I am superficial. She set the cup down. But superficial is not the same as blind. I built a whole career on reading a room in 3 seconds. And you, Haruto, are the only person on this island who isn't performing. I'm flattered, I said. I think. She waved that off. Don't be flattered. Be careful. Everyone else here is sulking, flirting, scheming, or crying for the camera. You're doing none of it. You're sitting very still, like a man who already knows how the movie ends and is just waiting for everyone else to catch up. She tilted her head. That's not sad. That's strategic. You're waiting for something. She had announced she was superficial, with the cool confidence of a surgeon declaring her instruments clean, and then she had cut straight to the bone anyway. I gave her the only thing I had decided to give. Maybe I just like the quiet, I said. Maybe. She did not believe me, and I did not need her to. Your wife looks at 3 things in a loop, you know. Her phone, except there's no phone. Then the door, then him. Erica sipped. I'm not saying anything. I'm superficial, but I notice things, and I like you, which on this island makes me practically your bodyguard. And what does a bodyguard want? I asked. Information? A storyline? Erica smiled, entirely unoffended. A good seat. When whatever you're waiting for finally happens, I want to be standing close enough to land in the shot. That's my whole religion, Haruto. Proximity to the moment. She lifted her cup. I don't need your plan. I just want to be near you when it goes off. It was the most honest alliance anyone had proposed to me in years, and the only one that arrived without a hidden invoice. I touched my cup to hers. A bodyguard who only wants good lighting is a bodyguard you can very nearly trust. It was the first time in years someone had stood near me without wanting me to carry something. I let myself enjoy it for exactly 1 breath, then went back to work. Across the cove, a different kind of date was failing. Ren had aimed his whole charming arsenal at Natsumi and was watching it bounce off a teenager with a notebook. I could not hear all of it over the surf, but I could read the body language, and the body language was a slow-motion accident. You keep checking your watch, Natsumi observed, in the flat tone of a scientist noting a result. Every time a question lands, your thumb goes to it. Tap, tap. People do that when they want to be somewhere the questions aren't. Ren spread his hands, the gesture of a man who owns boardrooms. It's a habit. Successful people value their time. Successful people who feel safe don't fidget, she said. You fidget. That's interesting. She wrote something. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm 18. What would I know? I'm just saying you smile like a man reading a statement his lawyer wrote. Ren's smile, the famous one, finally slipped its leash for half a second, and underneath it was something cold and irritated and badly startled. "There it is," Natsumi said softly, almost gently, watching the cold thing surface and dive again. "That face, that's the real one." She closed her notebook. "You can put the nice one back now. I've already met the other." Ren laughed, and this one was real, sharp along its edge. "You're a rude little girl." "I'm a polite little girl," she corrected. "Rude would be saying out loud what I think you're hiding." "I'm not rude, I'm just patient." She sipped her soda, and somewhere in his expensive chest, something went quietly cold and stayed that way. That was the whole trap, and nobody had built it but Ren himself. A grown man can survive an insult. He cannot survive a calm child asking why he is sweating. Status is armor against contempt. It is useless against simple, friendly observation, because observation does not care how much you are worth. Down the beach, under a shaded arch, the cruelest date of the afternoon was unfolding without raising its voice. Mirai had arranged herself into the picture of a thoughtful, slightly wounded wife, and Satoru was dismantling the picture one gentle question at a time. I passed near enough on my way back from Erika's station to catch the heart of it, and to understand that the island had found a man who could turn a romantic date into a tax audit for the human soul. "You're performing softness for me," Satoru said pleasantly, hands folded in his lap. "It's well done, but softness doesn't look at the exits." He smiled like a teacher who likes the student he is failing. "I've been watching you all week, Mirai. You look in 3 directions on a loop. At your husband, to check he's still asleep at the wheel. At Ren, to check he still wants you. And at the camera, to check which face to wear. A soft woman only looks in one direction. At the person in front of her." Mirai's laugh came out brittle. "That's a very dramatic reading of a tired woman." Her napkin moved, casually, to cover the bracelet on her wrist, and Satoru's eyes flicked to the gesture and filed it without comment. "I'm only saying what your hands say," he murmured. "Your mouth and your hands are telling 2 different stories. I find the hands more honest. They usually are." "Then ask me something real," Mirai said, lifting her chin, trying to grab the wheel back. "Since you see everything." Satoru obliged, gently. "All right, when you picture the rest of your life, who is standing beside you in the photograph?" She opened her mouth, and the pause before her answer ran longer than the answer had any right to. "My husband, obviously," she said. Satoru only smiled. "You glanced at the camera before you said it, not at the thought, at the lens. That's the tell, Mirai. The truth doesn't rehearse in front of an audience first." She held her composure, but it was the composure of someone gripping a railing. He had not mentioned the affair. He did not have to. He had simply described her, accurately, in a calm voice, on camera. And accuracy is the one thing a liar cannot argue with. I kept walking. There is a difference between what Satoru did and what I was doing, and it mattered to me even if it mattered to no one else on the sand. He took people apart because he liked the sound they made. I was only waiting for people to take themselves apart and saving the pieces in case anyone ever needed to see them assembled. He was a predator. I was a witness with a long memory and a longer fuse. The island could not always tell us apart. I never lost track of which was which. I had not laid a finger on her, and a stranger was doing my work for free, the way the scoreboard had, the way the island kept doing. Further along at the flower arch, the afternoon's only sincere person was being quietly robbed. Renji had Aoi cornered with the full wedding host package, and Aoi, who believed in love the way other people believe in weather, was buying every word. "I've hosted 300 weddings," Renji murmured. "And I can always tell. The ones who last have a certain light. You have it, Aoi. Fate doesn't bring 2 people to a random island for nothing." Aoi pressed her hands to her chest, glowing. It was the same fate Satoru charged for, and Ren wore like cologne, repackaged in white ribbon. I made a note to warn Natsumi later, who would already have noticed, and who would be furious about it on Aoi's behalf in her own flat way. She had noticed, in fact. From 2 stations away, Natsumi watched Renji work and muttered to nobody. He recycles the same speech for everyone. Even his lies aren't fresh. She would corner Aoi by nightfall, and say it kinder. And Aoi would nod and believe her for an hour and Renji for a week. Some people are weatherproofed against good advice. Aoi was a screen door in a storm. Satoru caught me before I reached the path back, wheeling himself into my way with a small, deliberate smile. He had spent the date reading my wife, and now he had turned the same instrument on me. "You're a strange one," he said, conversational. "The whole island thinks you're the wounded husband drifting through it. I don't. And what do you think I am? I asked. He studied me, and for the first time his warmth had a floor under it, something patient and a little dangerous. I think you're not sulking. I think you're testing. You're walking through this place, checking the locks, very quietly, deciding something. His smile widened. I think you already know everything, and you're just standing here, deciding whether any of them is still worth punishing. I find that fascinating. I'll be watching you, instead of them now, if that's all right. It was not all right, but I smiled like it was. Because a man who notices the right thing is far more dangerous when he thinks you haven't noticed him. I'm just here for my wife, I said, which was true enough to pass and false enough to matter. Of course you are, Satoru answered, and rolled away pleased with himself, the only person on the island who had read the right page of the right book, and the only one I would now have to watch as carefully as he was watching me. They called the next game the Blind Trail, and it was the cruelest thing the producers had built yet, mostly because it looked like a children's party. An obstacle course of rope bridges, mud pits, hanging nets, and a shallow water trench at the end. One partner wore a blindfold and walked it. The other stood at the rail and guided them through with nothing but their voice. It was a trust exercise. Reality television loves a trust exercise because nothing tests a marriage like asking one person to close their eyes and believe the other one is telling the truth about where the ground is. The producers paired us off with the cruelty of people who had read the edit before they built the course. Spouses with spouses, rivals with innocents. Daiki, blindfolded, announced that muscles never lie, and trust comes naturally to the disciplined, then strode with total confidence into a hanging net and wore it like a bridal veil for the rest of the round. Kaito, guiding, gave his directions in the flat tone of a man helping a tourist find a bus. And somehow that bored honesty worked better than anyone's tenderness. Dorian assigned the blindfolds with theatrical glee. The walkers would be blind. The partners would be their only eyes. Listen carefully to the voice you trust most, he sang. Or, the voice you're legally bound to. Same thing, surely. Mirai pulled the blindfold over her eyes and immediately reached for control she could no longer see. Just tell me clearly, Haruto. Don't mumble. You always mumble when you're nervous. I was not nervous. I had never been calmer in my life, but she needed a version of me who was failing, so she reached for him out of habit. 3 steps forward, flat ground, I said. Calm even, exactly the way you talk a frightened animal across a road. She took 2 steps and stopped, head tilted, suspicious of the very air. Are you sure it's flat? It doesn't sound flat. I did not know what flat was supposed to sound like. Neither did she. But trust, I was learning, is not blind. Trust just has extremely selective hearing. It's flat, I said. 1 more step. She took the step sideways, correcting a mistake I had not asked her to make, and put her foot squarely into the first mud pit. The audience roared. Mirai yelped, more outraged than hurt, mud climbing her ankle. You said flat. It was flat, I said. You turned. She had turned. She always turns. Give the woman a straight line, and her instinct is to assume the man holding the map is wrong. She wrenched the blindfold up to glare at me, breaking the rules and the illusion at once. A streak of mud had reached her wrist, and she rubbed at the bracelet there, and that was the first time I saw her notice the scratch in the gold. A small scratch, from a coconut forest, deepening now under island mud. She rubbed it like it could be undone. It could not. Blindfold stays down, my love, Dorian called cheerfully. The whole point is trust. Mirai yanked it back over her eyes and muttered something about Haruto's tone, because the tone was easier to blame than the ears. We inched forward, and every single time I told her the truth, she paused to audit it, and every pause cost her balance. The rope bridge was worse. I told her the left rope was frayed and to keep her weight to the right. She kept it left, to spite the instruction more than the rope, and spent half a minute swaying and swearing while the audience wept with joy. I did not laugh. I kept calling the truth into the noise, steady as a metronome, and she kept treating my calm as proof that I did not care. In her grammar, love shouted. A level voice meant a cold heart. I had spoken that grammar for years, badly, and somewhere on this island I had finally put it down. Down the course, a very different performance was underway, and it was aimed at me even though my wife was the one watching it. Ren had drawn Aoi as his walker, and Ren had realized, with the speed of a man who has built a career on optics, that this game was a stage for public nobility. You're safe, Aoi, I've got you, he murmured, rich and warm, loud enough for 3 cameras. I would never let you fall. Just breathe. Trust me. Aoi, blindfolded and trusting by nature, glided through her obstacles like a swan because a person who actually wants to be guided is absurdly easy to guide. It looked like magic. It was just cooperation, the one ingredient my marriage had run out of. He narrated his own nobility the entire way down the course. Almost there, brave girl. I'm so proud of you. Aoi beamed under her blindfold like a sunflower that had found a window. It was a lovely performance, and it carried exactly one flaw, which was that it was a performance. A man who needs an audience in order to be gentle is not gentle. He is advertising, and the product is himself. Mireille could not see Ren, but she could hear him, and hearing him was worse. Every velvet word he poured over Aoi was a word he had stopped spending on her. I felt her stiffen at the sound of it. Jealousy arriving even through a blindfold, even covered in mud, even mid-betrayal of the man she was blaming for the mud. Off to my left, Rena was conducting her own masterclass in trust, and it had no velvet in it whatsoever. She had drawn Yuto, and Yuto was approximately as brave as a wet napkin in a thunderstorm. There's a net, he whimpered. What if there's a snake in the net? What do I do if there's a snake? There's no snake, Rena said. If there's a snake, I'll handle it. Left foot. Now. Yuto did not move, but hypothetically, the snake. Do I show it a leaf? I read that a leaf can confuse a snake. Should I have brought a leaf? Yuto, Rena said, in a voice flat enough to land a plane on. The only thing on this course that will hurt you is me. If you don't move your left foot in the next 2 seconds. He moved his left foot. He moved it beautifully. Terror, it turns out, is its own kind of trust. It was the whole lesson of the day in one trembling man. Yuto trusted Rena not because he respected her, but because he was too frightened to do anything else, and it carried him across. My wife would not trust me because she had decided, somewhere over 8 long years, that respecting me was beneath her. Fear got Yuto over the net. Contempt was putting Mireille face first into the mud. I knew which of the two I would rather have been married to, and it was not the brave one. Natsumi watched the 3 couples from the sideline with the detached interest of a girl grading an experiment. Funny, she said, half to me, half to the camera that had learned to follow her. The instructions are identical. Walk, stop, turn, trust. The only variable is whether the person walking actually wants to hear the truth. She nodded toward Mireille, mud-streaked and arguing. Information only helps the people who want it. The rest just want to be agreed with. It was the most accurate description of my entire marriage I had ever heard, delivered by a teenager, for free, on live television. We reached the water trench, the final obstacle. A shallow ribbon of seawater you crossed on a series of unsteady stones. I could see exactly which stones held and which ones rocked. I had been watching them the whole time, because watching is the only thing I am reliably good at. Stop, I said, as Mireille reached the edge. The first stone is loose. Step past it to the second. Long step, then wait. Clear. Correct. The truth, handed to her in a flat, calm voice, for free, and she did the thing she has done for 8 years. She decided that because I said it gently, it could not be urgent, and because I said it without panic, it could not be important. I know how to cross a stream, Haruto, she snapped, and stepped directly onto the loose first stone. It rolled. She went down into the shallow water with a splash that the audience would be replaying for weeks, sitting in the trench, blindfold-soaked, mud and seawater claiming the rest of the bracelet. For one long second, the whole island was silent, and then it was not silent at all. "Help me up!" she sputtered, tearing the blindfold off, hand thrust toward me, soaked and furious and certain the fault lived anywhere but in her own ears. The old husband would have splashed in, lifted her, apologized to her for her own fall, and turned it into a story where he was clumsy and she was brave. I crouched at the edge and offered my hand, steady, present, but I did not leap, and I did not apologize, and I did not pretend it was my doing. "I told you the first stone was loose," I said quietly, just for her. "I told you to step past it. You stepped on it. Not cruel, not loud, just the record, read back once, calmly, while the cameras drank it in. She took my hand and climbed out, and the look she gave me was pure betrayal, as if I had pushed her, as if the truth I had handed her had been the trap instead of the rescue. "Your tone was wrong," she hissed under her breath, wringing seawater from her sleeve. "You didn't say it like you meant it. There it was, not the wrong information. The wrong tone." I had been failing her tone for the better part of a decade, apparently, and only now had a camera caught the verdict. Behind us, Ren guided Aoi across the same trench, like a prince leading a parade, calling every stone, catching her elbow at the wobble, soaking up a round of applause designed for weddings. Mireille stood dripping in the water and watched another woman receive the gentleness she had thrown away on me, and something in her face curdled. He had not done it for Aoi. He had done it to be seen doing it, and the person it wounded most was the one he claimed to love, standing in a ditch, watching him be tender to someone else. By the time we dragged ourselves to the finish, the edit was already writing itself. Out in the world, viewers who knew nothing about hotel rooms or archived clips were watching a calm man tell his wife the truth, and a wife refused to hear it, and they were quietly picking a side. The clips would be sliced into 1,000 little videos by morning. The quiet husband, they would call me, the one who warned her. I had spent 8 years invisible. It is a strange thing to become legible to strangers before you ever became legible to your own wife. Rina and Yuto crossed last, Yuto shrieking the whole way, Rina threatening him across every stone, and the two of them reached the far side intact and weirdly triumphant. I did it, Yuto breathed, astonished to be alive. There was no snake. There was never a snake, Rina said. There's never a snake. You just have to walk anyway. Half the island cheered for the coward who obeyed, and nobody cheered for the confident woman who hadn't. Erica had finished her own round early and spent it filming everyone else's. She lowered her phone and looked at me with something close to respect. You know what's wild, she said. You came first in honesty before they even counted a single vote. People can feel it. They just don't know why yet. She lifted her coconut in a small toast. Good lighting on you today, by the way. Turns out, suffering photographs beautifully. Dorian bounded to the finish line, sensing the day had handed him exactly the drama he sold. What a course. What lessons. What a beautifully soggy metaphor I will absolutely not explain. He clapped his hands. But here's the twist our viewers have been waiting for. They've been watching all of you. Every smile, every stumble, every tone of voice. His grin sharpened. Tonight, the public votes. Not on who's strongest. Not on who's prettiest. On who they think is the most honest person on this island. Sleep well with that, my darlings. The cast scattered into nervous arithmetic. A vote on honesty is a terrifying thing to hand a group of people who have spent a week performing for a lens. Ren went straight to Renji to start counting allies he had not earned. Mireille went to find a mirror and a story. Natsumi found a deck chair and a clear view of all of it, because Natsumi had been quietly casting her vote since the yacht, and she had never once changed it. I looked at my wife, wet to the bone, scrubbing seawater off a scratched gold bracelet she could not bring herself to take off, and I thought about that word, honest. The public was about to vote on honesty, knowing none of the truth, and somehow I already knew the cameras had taught them more than anyone on this island had said out loud. They set the voting stage at dusk, a half circle of chairs facing a tall screen, and above it a new graphic had appeared that morning without ceremony. Final ceremony tomorrow night. To the audience, it was a countdown to a party. To me, it was a countdown to something else, and only a handful of us knew the difference. The graphic pulsed gently in the corner of every shot, counting toward a celebration that perhaps 3 people on the island understood was actually a detonation. My mother has a sense of theater she will go to her grave denying. She had built a clock into the set and let the cast hang balloons on it. Tomorrow, the balloons would still be there, so would the clock. Dorian explained the game with the gravity of a man announcing a coronation. Tonight, my darlings, the public decides. Not who is strongest, not who is loveliest. They vote on one quality only, honesty. Who on this island do the people at home believe is telling the truth? He beamed. You'll each have a moment to speak. Use it wisely. The audience has been watching you very, very closely. That last line landed differently on different faces. Aoi looked excited. Yuto looked ill. Mireille looked like a woman walking into a meeting she was sure she had prepared for. Ren looked like a man who had never once lost a vote he had decided to win. He went first, because of course he did. Ren stood, buttoned a jacket he did not need to button, and gave the audience the full performance, the one that closed rooms full of investors. Honesty, he began, letting the word breathe. Honesty is leadership. I have spent my life being honest with shareholders, with partners, with the people who depend on me. On this island, I've simply tried to be a steady hand, a man others can lean on. He let his gaze sweep the cast like a searchlight looking for someone to rescue. Trust is the only currency that matters, and you can't fake it. He gave speeches, I thought, like he charged for them by the syllable. It was beautiful. It was structured. It had a beginning, a middle, and a call to action. It was also, to anyone who had watched him abandon a partner in a forest and perform tenderness at a stranger in a ditch, completely hollow, and the camera has a cruel gift for finding the hollow in a thing that rings. Mireille went next and chose softness, the wounded wife register she had been rehearsing all week. I think honesty is just showing up, she said, voice trembling on cue. Even when it's hard. Even when your marriage is tested in front of the whole world. I'm still here. I'm still trying. Her hand drifted toward the bracelet, realized the cameras were close, and slid quietly under the table instead, hiding the scratched gold like a woman hiding a tell at a card game she had already started losing. The others took their turns, and the island sorted itself in miniature. Aoi said honesty was believing the best in people, which was true and was also exactly how Renji had been robbing her blind all week. Yuto confessed he had lied on his application about being a strong swimmer and looked enormously relieved to have it off his chest. Kaito said honesty was charging the same price to everyone, tourists included, which on reflection made him the second most honest person on the island. Renji, feeling the math turn against his new ally, tried to bend it. Between speeches, he drifted chair to chair, murmuring that Ren was misunderstood, that the edit was unfair, that strong men always get punished for their strength. He was running a campaign in a game that cannot be campaigned. You cannot lobby a feeling. The audience had already felt what it felt, and it had no interest whatsoever in Renji's footnotes. Then Dorian turned to me, and the island leaned in to watch the boring husband fumble his moment. Haruto, your turn. What does honesty mean to you? I had thought about lying. A good speech would have been easy enough to build, but I had spent a week refusing to perform, and the refusal was the only honest thing I had left, so I kept it. I don't think honesty is a speech, I said. I think it's just what's left after you stop managing how you look. I shrugged. I try not to sell it. People can usually tell when it's for sale. That was the whole thing. 11 words longer than I wanted. I sat down. Somewhere across the cove, my mother, if she was watching the feed, would have allowed herself the closest thing she has to a smile, which is the absence of a frown. The cast reacted before the audience did. Rina looked at me and gave a single approving nod, the kind she rations like clean water. Natsumi did not even look up from her notebook. She just underlined something she had clearly written days ago. Erica, scrolling a tablet the producers let her keep for social engagement, made a small noise. Oh, she said quietly. Oh, they like that. They really like that. Like what? Mireille asked too sharply. The comments, Erica said, not unkindly. They're moving, fast. She turned the tablet face down, which from Erica is an act of mercy, and looked at Mireille with something that was almost pity. You might want to sit down for the board. Far away from our island, in 100 bars and offices and living rooms, the audience had been doing what audiences do. They had been feeling. They did not know about a hotel corridor or a service zone shower or a folder labeled in a control room. They knew only what the edit had shown them. A man who told his wife the truth and a wife who would not hear it. A CEO who performed tenderness at the cameras. A quiet husband who carried a basket and offered a steady hand from the edge of a ditch. People cannot always name a lie. They can almost always smell one. In a crowded bar on the mainland, a room full of strangers who would never learn a single one of our names argued over the screen the way people argue over a match. One of them said the husband was obviously the only real person up there. Another said the wife was clearly hiding something. A third, half drunk and entirely correct, jabbed a finger at Ren's frozen smile and announced, "That guy did something. Look at his face. That's a guilty face wearing a very nice watch." They did not know a thing. They simply knew. Dorian milked the silence as the results compiled, then stepped aside as the screen woke. "Remember," he said, suddenly serious in the way showmen get when they sense something real. "Our viewers have seen things none of us can fully explain. Sometimes an audience feels more than it sees. Let's find out what they felt." The board loaded from the bottom. Near the floor of public trust, in a spot that would follow him into every boardroom he ever walked into again, sat Ren Amamiya, the man who had just delivered a flawless speech about honesty. A rung above the bottom, lower than she had ever ranked at anything in her life, sat Mireille. And at the very top of the island's honesty, above the influencer and the coach and the host and the beauty, above everyone who had performed, sat the boring husband who had said 11 words and sat down. For a long moment nobody on the platform spoke, and the silence did more work than any speech of mine could have. Daiki, who takes all things at their word, started clapping for me with his entire heart before he noticed the room had gone strange, then kept clapping anyway, because Daiki finishes what he begins. Yuto whispered that he had voted for me, which was both against the rules and physically impossible, since contestants could not vote, but the sentiment was pure. Even Satoru inclined his head a careful fraction, a chess player acknowledging a move he had failed to see coming. The silence on the platform was its own kind of verdict. I watched it land on Mireille's face, the slow horror of a woman who had performed her whole life and just learned the audience could see the strings. Her hand was gone under the table entirely now, gripping the bracelet she could not stop touching and could not bear to be seen touching. Rena, who did not know the half of it and somehow knew all of it, summed up the evening in the flat voice of a woman stating a weather report. "Huh," she said, looking at Ren's name pinned to the bottom of the board. "Lost the coconuts, lost the vote." She glanced at Mireille, then at me, and added, almost to herself, "Lost more than that, looks like." She had no idea how close she had sailed to the exact truth. She just knew weight and votes and which men come back light. Mireille found me in the scatter afterward, off the stage, away from the worst of the lenses, and for the first time all week, she reached for me as if she actually needed something. Haruto, that was humiliating. They put me near the bottom. Say something. She wanted the old husband. She wanted comfort, a reframe, a hand to make the board mean less than it meant. Tell me it's just editing. Tell me they don't understand us. I looked at her for a moment, the woman I had married, scratched bracelet and all, and I gave her the truth one more time, gently, the way I had given it on the trail. "They understand more than you think," I said. "That's the part that scares you." Then I walked away, and I did not look back to see her face do the thing faces do when the floor moves. What happened next, the public did not see, though they had, in a sense, caused it. Near the outdoor service bar, in a pocket of shadow, where the cast believed the cameras thinned out, Ren and Mireille found each other to panic in private. The show cameras were indeed thin there. The service microphones were not. "This is your husband's doing," Ren hissed, tapping his glass against the bar harder than a calm man taps anything. "That quiet little act, the whole country is falling in love with a man who folds laundry and looks wounded. Do you understand what that does to me?" His voice had lost every smooth edge it owned. Underneath the CEO was just a frightened man who had finally found a room he could not buy. "He's not acting, Ren." Mireille's voice was small and terrible. "That's what you don't get. He's not playing anything." He stopped. "That's why they believe him." A pause. The sound of ice in a glass held too tightly. What if he knows? What if he's known the whole time, and this is what knowing looks like? "Then we end it cleaner and faster," Ren said. "Before tomorrow." "And what?" There was something new in Mireille's voice now. A hairline of doubt running through her certainty, like the scratch running through her gold. "End the show? Or end him?" "Because those are very different things, Ren, and I am no longer sure which one you mean." He did not answer, which was its own kind of answer. For the first time, my wife looked at the man she had chosen and saw a stranger standing there, and a colder one than the husband she had thrown away. And neither of them noticed the small red light on the underside of the service rail. Neither noticed the cool room across the island where Mika Hayase listened to two people incriminate themselves with nothing but their own fear, and quietly slid the audio into the folder where the other clips were waiting. "Archive," Reiko's voice said in Mika's ear, unsurprised as ever. "Same place, they're starting to do our work for us." On the screen, beside the night shower and the North Trail, a third file settled into place. The library was nearly complete. The marriage was the last to know. Mika had asked Reiko once, early on, why they did not simply air it and end the cruelty. Reiko's answer was the coldest kind thing Mika had ever heard. Because aired, it is a scandal, and scandals fade by the next season. Saved and shown at the right moment to the right faces, it becomes justice. My son does not need a viral clip. He needs a room where she finally understands what she did. Mika never asked again. She just kept the folder and waited, the way everyone Reiko trusted eventually learned to wait. I sat alone at the far end of the beach that night, listening to the surf and the distant noise of a cast pretending the evening had not happened. The audience knew less than the coconuts had, less than a hidden camera on a service post, less than my own mother's quiet folder. They knew almost nothing. And still, given almost nothing, a few 100,000 strangers had judged my marriage more honestly in one evening than I had managed to in 8 years. There was a lesson in that, and it was not a comfortable one. Dorian found me before I went in, dropping onto the sand beside me with the careful cheer of a man who senses he is in a real moment and does not entirely want to be. "Big night for you, quiet man," he said. "The viewers adore you. Do you know what that's worth?" Then he stood, brushing sand off expensive shorts, and delivered the hook he did not know he was delivering. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we hold an auction. Lots of fun, lots of surprises. The winning bidder gets to ask any contestant one question, live in front of everyone. People will pay a fortune for the right question." He winked. "Sleep well, someone always buys trouble." I watched him go and thought about Ren at the service bar, frightened and cornered and newly armed. A man like that, handed a public question and a microphone, would not aim it at the weather. I went to bed knowing exactly who would buy the trouble, and exactly whom he would aim it at. And for the first time on that island, I let myself feel something close to ready. The morning of the final day, they handed each of us a small stack of tokens and called it an auction. Everyone got the same number to start, which is the producer's idea of fairness. And within the hour, it would reveal exactly who we all were. "Welcome to the secret auction," Dorian announced, perched behind a little podium with a gavel he was clearly thrilled to own. "Today, you bid on advantages. Some are small, some will change the entire finale. Spend wisely. Spend ruthlessly, spend like the cameras are watching, because they are." He banged the gavel for no reason and loved it. The first lots were minor. Extra dessert. A private phone call home, which made half the cast lean forward like starving people. Renji bought the phone call for almost nothing, then announced to the group that he did not actually need to call anyone. He just enjoyed owning things other people wanted. "That, my friends, is civilization," Renji said grandly. "Civilization is simply the art of buying other people's nerves before they can sell yours." It was the single most honest thing the oily little host had said all week, and naturally, he had no idea it was honest. The minor lots drew out everyone's true nature in miniature. Daiki bought a tub of protein powder for an obscene number of tokens and actually wept. Yuto bought immunity from the next physical challenge and looked, for the first time in 2 weeks, genuinely at peace, like a man who had finally outwitted the coconuts. Aoi bid on nothing and handed her tokens to Renji because he seemed to want them so badly, which explained both why she kept losing and why I had quietly decided to make sure she at least got home with her dignity intact. Then Dorian held up a token painted gold, and the air on the stage changed. "Our headline lot," he purred. "The right to ask any one contestant a single question live on the main stage, tonight, in front of the audience and the whole watching world. They must answer. No editing, no escape." He let it dangle. "Who wants the most dangerous thing money can buy?" Ren's paddle went up before Dorian finished the sentence. He did not bid so much as pounce. A man at the top of the world does not lunge at things. He had been near the bottom of a board last night, and now he lunged. The bidding should have been a contest, but Ren refused to let it be one. Every time another paddle twitched, he doubled. He spent like a man trying to drown a memory, piling tokens onto the table until the others simply stopped, not because they could not afford to play, but because watching him was answer enough. Rina leaned over to Daiki and said, not at all quietly, "He's not bidding, he's bleeding." Daiki nodded with great wisdom, understanding nothing and everything at the same time. Even the people who could not name what was wrong with Ren could feel the shape of it, the way you feel a storm in a bad knee before the sky agrees to it. Desperation has a smell, and money makes it stronger, never weaker. "Sold," Dorian said, almost gently, to the gentleman who needed it most. Ren sat back, victorious, holding a gold token he had paid a fortune for, and he had no notion that he had just bought the most expensive mirror on the island. He thought he had purchased a weapon. He had purchased a confession with a price tag. Ren had found, I thought, the only island on Earth where a man could pay extra to look insecure in high definition. Beside him, Mireille lifted her own paddle out of the way, and the clasp of her bracelet caught on the wood, dragging the scratched gold into the light for one ugly second before she freed it and tucked her wrist against her side. She had stopped defending Ren's choices out loud. She had started watching them the way you watch a driver take a turn too fast. Twice during the bidding, Ren turned to her for the old reflexive approval, the glance that used to mean we are winning, and twice she gave him back nothing but a flat, frightened patience. Something between them had quietly changed gears. She had chosen him for his certainty, and his certainty was the very first thing the island had taken from him. The next lot was food, a full feast, real food, enough for the entire cast, delivered to the villa that night. After 2 weeks of rationed island catering, the table actually gasped. This was the lot people wanted with their stomachs instead of their strategy. I raised my paddle and bought it, all of it. I spent nearly everything I had on dinner, for people who had spent 2 weeks deciding whether I was worth noticing, and I did it without a speech. Interesting, Dorian said. Fishing. The honesty champion spends his war chest on appetizers. No advantage for yourself, Haruto? I shrugged. Not all advantages are for sale, I said. Some you just feed people and let them remember who showed up. It was a small line. It was also, I knew, the exact opposite of the man currently clutching a gold token like a life raft. Rina looked at the feast token in my hand, then at the food everyone was about to eat on my account, and gave me the nod again, the rationed one. Daiki announced that I was a true source of group gains. Even Erica, who measures everything in optics, murmured that it was the best move anyone's made all season, and you didn't even pose for it. The cast had a new center of gravity, and it was the man who bought them dinner instead of a knife. There was one last advantage before the gold token, a single safe pass through the finale's first cut. Mireille bought it. Quietly, quickly, without once looking at Ren, spending her own tokens on her own survival while her lover bled his on a weapon. It was the most honest thing she did all day, and nobody applauded, because nobody else understood that a wife buying her own lifeboat is a wife who has already heard the hull crack. In the cool control room, where none of us could see, the board was being prepared for the finale. Mika set a sealed packet at the edge of her desk, thick and official, the kind of envelope that ends marriages and starts new lives. Beside it, the folder of 3 clips sat closed, labeled and waiting. The final ceremony timer ticked down in the corner of every monitor. Reiko's voice came over the line, quiet and exact. Tonight, she said. Everything tonight. Not a minute before. Mika squared the packet against the folder and said nothing, because there was nothing left to ask. Back on the stage, Dorian rapped his gavel and turned to the man with the gold token. Our buyer has earned the floor. Ren, you hold the most dangerous lot of the day. Name your contestant. Ask your question. He grinned at the camera. Make it count. Ren rose slowly, savoring it, the smooth mask sliding back over the frightened man for one last performance. He looked around the half circle as if weighing his options, but there had only ever been one. I'll direct my question, he said to Haruto. The cast went quiet. My wife went very still. I stayed in my seat and waited, because a man who has bought a shovel should always be allowed to dig first. Haruto, Ren said, voice rich with manufactured curiosity, playing to the lenses. You tell everyone you love peace and quiet. You're the calm one, the simple husband, the honest man. He let contempt warm the edges of it. So explain something to all of us. Why would a man who claims to love silence so much sign up for the loudest reality show in the country? What's a quiet man really doing here, if not performing the quiet? It was not a bad trap. He had paid a fortune to set it, and he had aimed it at the one part of my story the audience could not yet see. A lesser version of me, the old husband, would have explained, would have justified, defended, filled the silence with reasons until the reasons sounded like guilt. That is the oldest trap on earth, and I had been walking into it for most of my adult life. You let the loaded question hang in the air and rot, and you let the whole room notice it was poisoned long before it ever reached you. I did not explain. I looked at Ren, then past him, just for half a second, at my wife. And then I gave the room the truth in the smallest box I could find. Sometimes, I said, you go somewhere loud because it's the only place quiet enough to finally hear who's lying. I let it sit. I didn't come here to perform anything. I came to listen. You'd be amazed what people say when they think the quiet man isn't really paying attention. The silence after that was not the awkward kind. It was the kind that happens when a room realizes it has just watched something land. Ren's smile held, the way a cracked windshield holds, technically intact and entirely ruined. He had paid for a public question and received a public answer that cost him everything the question was supposed to take from me. And Mireille stopped touching the bracelet. For 2 weeks, her hand had drifted to it in every tense moment, turning it, hiding it, cleaning it. Now her hand simply froze in her lap because the line had landed too close to a service zone shower and a north trail and a corridor she thought no one had followed her down. For 1 second, my wife looked at me as if she finally understood she had married someone she had never bothered to read. It had been generous of Ren, really, to buy himself a shovel before digging straight down on live television. The audience clips would be merciless. The honesty champion, asked to defend himself, had instead handed the room a sentence that everyone could feel pointed somewhere, even if they could not yet see where. Across the cast, I watched the last of the recalibration finish. Whatever doubt had survived the vote did not survive this. Daiki frowned at Ren, the way a large, honest dog frowns at a man who has just kicked something small. Erica had her tablet up again, and whatever scrolled across it made her press a hand to her mouth. In that mainland bar, I would hear later, a whole room stood and pointed at the screen at once, because the half-drunk man from the night before had just been proven right, and there is no purer joy on earth than a stranger who called it early. Mireille found her composure and reached for the only tool she had left, which was denial. He got lucky, she murmured to no one, to herself, to the camera. It was a good line, he got lucky. But her voice had gone thin, and luck does not make a wife stop breathing the way she had just stopped breathing. The auction was not finished, though everyone had stopped paying attention to it, which is exactly when the most dangerous person in the room makes his move. Satoru rolled forward and raised his paddle for the final lot. A quiet little advantage Dorian had nearly forgotten to mention, the right to swap one pair before the final ceremony. Why would you want that? Dorian asked, surprised. Satoru smiled his warm, terrible smile. I find the current arrangements emotionally inefficient, he said. I'd like to optimize them for the finale. Call it an educational environment. He bought the pair swap without a flicker, and the cast laughed nervously, not understanding that the coach had just bought the right to rearrange the chessboard one move before checkmate. Natsumi did understand, and Natsumi, as always, refused to let a manipulation pass without naming it. He just bought the power to put two people together who shouldn't be, she said flatly to the camera that loved her. Right before the end, that's not education. That's a man lighting a fire and calling it a lesson. She looked at Satoru without fear. I'll be watching what you do with it. Satoru inclined his head, delighted to be seen, which is the only thing men like Satoru truly want. I caught his eye as the stage emptied, and he gave me a small private nod, the nod of one strategist to another. He had not bought the swap to help me, and not to help Ren. He had bought it because he wanted to see what I would do when the board tilted, and because a man who collects the truth about people needs a finale to collect it in. He was building me a stage. I decided to let him, and to remember, when this was finished, exactly who had handed me the match. That night, we ate the feast I had bought. The whole cast crowded around a real table, loud and warm, and briefly almost human. Ren did not eat much. Mireille did not eat at all. I sat at the head of a table I had bought, surrounded by people who had spent 2 weeks failing to see me and now could not look away. And I felt the strangest thing, not triumph. Triumph was still hours off, sealed in a folder I had not opened. What I felt was quiet, the real kind, the exact thing I had told Ren I came to the island to find. I had spent 8 years as the most invisible man in my own marriage. It had taken a camera, an island, and a few 100,000 strangers to make me visible. And the only person at that whole loud table who still could not see me was the one who had once promised to love me best. And in the corner of every screen, balloons hung around a clock, counting down to a final ceremony that the public still believed was a celebration, while 3 clips and a sealed packet waited in a cool dark room for the right faces to arrive. They built the last bonfire on the beach at dusk, a wide ring of driftwood and flame with the cast seated around it in a half moon, the final ceremony timer glowing in the corner of every shot. Tomorrow at sunrise, the show would end. Satoru had spent his pair swap before the first log was lit, and he had spent it on me. He moved Mireille into the seat at my side and put Ren on the far curve of the circle, across the fire, where the flames would find his face every time he wanted the dark. He caught my eye once, pleased with his own staging, the coach who had promised me a stage and then quietly built it. Tonight, Dorian wanted feelings. Before we crown anyone, he said, firelight making him almost sincere, I want to go around the circle. One question. After everything, after the games and the votes and the very wet trust exercise, what did this island show you about yourself? He sat back. Be honest. The viewers will know if you aren't. They've gotten very good at that. The timer in the corner of the broadcast had stopped feeling like a party countdown and started feeling like exactly what it was. Even the cast, who knew nothing, had gone quiet around the fire, the way people go quiet near the end of a thing without being able to say why. Something larger than a game show was ending tonight, and the only 3 people who knew its real shape were a woman off the island, a producer in a cool dark room, and me. Rena went first, because Rena does not wait to be invited. It showed me people lie more when they're comfortable, she said, poking the fire. The second something costs them, the truth falls out. That's it. That's my whole speech. She had described the entire season in 3 sentences and gone back to her stick. Daiki cried before he even started, which is simply how Daiki begins most sentences. It showed me that strength isn't the muscle, he said, voice thick. It's like, who still shows up to carry things when nobody's clapping? He looked without subtlety at me. Some guys carry the basket. I respect the basket guys. Half the circle laughed, and half of it understood exactly what he meant, and Mireille sat very still between the 2 halves. Erica surprised everyone, including herself. I came here for followers, she admitted, turning her face from the fire so the light would not flatter her into lying. And I'm leaving caring about something dumb, like whether the people who deserve to win actually do. I hate that this place did that to me. My brand is going to suffer. It got the biggest laugh of the night, and underneath it she meant every word. Aoi said the island showed her that love was real, which broke my heart a little, because the island had mostly shown her that Renji would take her tokens. Natsumi, beside her, did not let it stand. It showed me that adults will call anything love if it gets them something, she said, eyes on the fire, voice flat as a verdict. Real love doesn't need an audience and doesn't keep score. Almost nothing I watched here qualified. Nobody asked who she meant. The fire popped into the silence. Then Yuto, bless him, detonated the tension exactly when it needed detonating. It showed me my fears were valid, he announced. This island has cameras everywhere. A man who reads your soul for sport, and Rena owns a coconut knife. I was right to be scared the entire time. Vindication. The whole circle broke. Even Rena, who allowed herself precisely 1/4 of a smile. Kaido's speech was the shortest and somehow the wisest. Island showed me nothing, he said. I already knew people. You pay what a thing is worth. You don't take what isn't yours. And you never trust a man who smiles before he's been paid. That's the whole island. You all just learned it on camera. He went back to his coconuts. Satoru offered something that sounded like vulnerability and was actually a sales pitch. The way everything he said was a sales pitch. It showed me that growth requires a witness, he murmured, eyes drifting to me. We only become honest when someone is watching closely enough to make the lie expensive. He was congratulating himself for noticing me, and Natsumi rolled her eyes so hard I nearly heard them turn. Renji declared, with no irony available to him at all, that the island had shown him the beauty of bringing people together. Aoi believed it, nobody else did. He had spent 2 weeks bringing himself closer to other people's tokens, and that was the only union the man had ever truly presided over. Through all of it, I watched 2 people fail to enjoy the warmth. Ren sat with the brittle patience of a man enduring a delay, drumming his fingers, checking the timer, wanting the sincere part to be over so the strategic part could resume. He did not want truth. He wanted his turn back. And Mireille, who had begun the night wearing the bracelet openly like a woman with nothing to hide, slowly slid her hand to cover it as one person after another stood up and said the word honest. I sat in that ring of firelight and felt something I had not felt in 8 years of marriage. I felt held. Not by my wife, who was busy hiding a gift she could no longer wear, but by a blunt tomboy and a weeping bodybuilder and a vain influencer and a fearless teenager, none of whom owed me a thing. It is a strange, quiet grief to be loved correctly by strangers in the exact week your wife finally stops bothering. I let myself feel it. Then I folded it away, because the night was nowhere near over. When the circle came back around, Mireille rose before Dorian could call on anyone else. She stepped into the firelight, and the camera swung to her, and I understood that she had decided to make her move in the most public room she would ever stand in. I need to say something, she said, and her voice did the trembling thing, the rehearsed catch I had heard for years. To my husband, in front of everyone, because he deserves that much. She turned to me, eyes shining right on schedule. Haruto. I've made mistakes here. I got lost. I got caught up in the lights and the game, and I forgot what mattered. The tears arrived, real looking, expensive. I want to start over. I want us to start over. Please, let's go home and start again. It was a beautiful apology, It had everything except the one ingredient that makes an apology mean something. She said, "Start over the way you say it about a phone app that has frozen, as if betrayal were just a notification bug we could clear by restarting the device." The old husband would have stood up into those tears and dissolved. I had buried the old husband somewhere around the first mud pit. The circle held its breath. Ren's jaw had gone to stone. The viewers, somewhere out in the dark, were splitting into camps that would argue about this clip for a week. And I did not stand up, and I did not rage, and I did not melt. I just asked her one quiet question, the only one that mattered. "What do you give up?" I said. She blinked. "What? To start over. You're asking to come back. So tell me, in front of everyone, what you'd give up to do it." I kept my voice gentle, the trail voice, the calm she had always mistaken for coldness. "Name one thing you'd lose, one thing it would cost you. Because starting over isn't a feeling, Mireille, it's a bill. So what do you pay?" Across the fire, Ren made a small, involuntary movement, half rising, as if to rescue the moment, then caught himself. He could not defend her here without standing up beside her and answering the very same question, and his answer would have been uglier than hers, so he sat. His silence joined mine, and for one strange instant, the two men in Mireille's life were united in the single act of refusing to save her from her own apology. And my wife, who could improvise a reframe for any accusation, who had talked her way out of 8 years of small lies, opened her mouth and found nothing in it, because the honest answer was nothing. She wanted to restart only now that the cost had moved to her side of the table. She wanted the lifeboat, not the marriage, and everyone watching could see her searching for a sacrifice she had never once intended to make. Her hand moved to the bracelet then, almost on instinct, and she began to slide it off her wrist, as if removing Ren's gift could be the thing she offered. But she stopped halfway. The gold caught at her knuckle. Because to take it off here now on camera, in answer to my question, would be to confess in front of the world exactly whose bracelet it was and what it had cost her marriage. So she left it there, half removed, a confession she could neither complete nor undo, and that small frozen gesture said more than her whole speech had. I let the silence finish what her apology couldn't. Then I gave her the only honest thing I had left to give her, and it was not the thing she came for. "I hear you," I said. "Not I forgive you. Not let's go home. Just I hear you, Mireille." And I sat back down. Mireille stayed standing in the firelight a moment too long, the way a performer lingers on a stage after the applause fails to arrive, waiting for a reaction the script had promised and the room refused to provide. Then she sat, slowly, the half-removed bracelet sliding back down to her wrist, where it would stay until a screen finally took it from her. She had come to the fire to win me back. She left it having shown a few 100,000 strangers the exact reason she had lost me. For the first time in our marriage, I had answered her performance with the truth and refused to apologize for the gap between them. And the worst part for her, the part the cameras caught in full, was that I did not look angry. I looked free. Out in the world, the clip was already tearing the audience clean in half. One camp called me cold for not carrying my crying wife home. The other camp, the larger one, the one that had watched her hand drift to that bracelet for 2 weeks, called it the most restrained act of self-respect they had ever seen on television. Both camps were right, in their way. I was cold. I had earned the right to it. One warm forgiveness at a time, across 8 years, until the warmth simply ran out. Dorian, sensing the segment had peaked, mercifully called the night to a close. The cast drifted toward the villas, subdued, and the cameras powered down for the broadcast portion of the evening. And that, of course, is when the most honest conversation of the night took place, in a spot where two people believed no one was listening. What happened on the service path, the public would not see until later. But the island heard it, the way the island heard everything, through the small microphones bolted to the rails that the cast had long stopped noticing. Ren caught Mireille in the dark near the service bar, and the smooth voice was entirely gone now, burned off by the firelight and the vote and the question he could not unhear. "What was that?" he hissed. "Crying to him? Begging him to take you home? You forgot who you came here with. I'm trying not to drown, Ren." Mireille's voice was raw, stripped of every performance. "Don't you understand? They love him. The whole country loves him. I have to land somewhere when this ends." "So that's it," he said, and his jealousy turned ugly and possessive and loud. "The second the wind changes, you swim for the bigger boat. You don't get to do that. You came here on my arm. You're mine until I say otherwise." There it was. Not a confession of love. A claim of ownership, spoken aloud, recorded clean, the exact line a man says only when he has stopped pretending the woman is a person. Mireille gripped the bracelet so hard, the clasp bit a small red mark into her skin. She did not answer him. Somewhere in the last hour, she had finally understood that she had traded a man who told her the truth for a man who thought he had bought her. For 2 weeks, she had been afraid of the wrong man on this island, the quiet one who watched too much. The quiet one had only ever told her the truth and let her choose. This one, the one she had actually chosen, was informing her in the dark that she did not get to choose at all. She finally understood the difference between a man who sees you and a man who owns you, and she had understood it about 12 days too late to be useful. In the cool control room, Mika went very still as the audio came through. She did not move the clip to the folder. She did not have to be told. She simply opened the file and let it drop into place beside the night shower and the North Trail and the first service bar panic. Then she reached for the thick sealed packet at the edge of her desk, the one with the divorce documents inside, and set it squarely on top of the folder. "That's the last piece," she said into her headset. Reiko's voice answered, unhurried, final, the sound of a drawer closing for good. "Then it isn't a folder anymore," my mother said. "Now it's a sequence. Lock it. Cue it for sunrise." On the monitor, the file sealed itself shut, and the timer ticked toward a ceremony the cast still believed was a party. I had walked away from the service path before Ren ever opened his mouth. I did not need to hear it. I had spent 2 weeks learning that the island would catch every word a guilty man said when he thought the cameras had blinked, and that all I had to do was not be the one chasing. The island had bars and beaches and palm trees, and now, finally, it had a man confessing the truth of his whole character into a piece of landscaping equipment. I felt no triumph when I learned of it later, and I had expected to. I had pictured this moment for 2 weeks, the moment the last piece clicked into the box. What I felt instead was tired and a little sad, the specific sadness of a man finally proven right about something he would have given anything to be wrong about. Being right about a betrayal is the loneliest victory there is. You win, and the only prize is the confirmation that all of it was true. I lay awake that last night and listened to the surf and the timer I could feel even when I couldn't see it. Somewhere across the water, my mother was arranging the morning. Somewhere down the path, my wife was learning what she had chosen. And I, the quiet husband, the basket guy, the man who said 11 words and meant them, waited for a sunrise. I had been walking toward it since the night a screen lit up in a pavilion, and I decided, calmly, that I would rather be free than be lied to. The final ceremony was the grandest set they had built all season. A wide stage under an open pavilion strung with lights, a live audience in tiered seats, and the whole thing going out to the country in real time. Above the stage hung the screen, enormous and dark, waiting. The live stream timer in the corner of every feed counted down its last minutes towards 0. Everyone arrived expecting a party. The cast wore their best. The audience buzzed. Dorian glittered in something with too many sequins. Mireille had chosen a dress that photographed like forgiveness and stood near me as if proximity were a contract. She had spent the flight to the mainland rehearsing warmth, touching my arm at the right intervals, laughing at the right moments, restoring the marriage in the air the way you stage a house you mean to sell. I let her. There was no cruelty left in me, only a patience that must have looked from the outside almost like tenderness. In a way it was. I was being tender to the version of her that still believed she had 2 more weeks of road before the cliff. Ren wore the easy confidence of a man who has decided that whatever happened on the island would stay, conveniently, on the island. I stood a little apart from my wife, the way I had stood apart all season, and I waited. I have always been good at waiting. It is the one talent nobody applauds, and the only one that ever mattered. "Welcome to the finale," Dorian boomed, and the audience roared. 2 weeks, 1 island, a great deal of mud, and more drama than my poor heart can take. Before we crown our winner, let's remember the good times. Roll the highlight reel. Behind the stage, in a booth the audience could not see, Mika Hayashi sat with one hand resting on a switch and the sealed sequence loaded and waiting. Beside her, my mother watched the monitors with the stillness of a woman who had timed this to the second. "Let them have the reel," Reiko said quietly. "Let them laugh first. The fall is always taller from the top of a laugh." She had built a clock into the set, hung balloons on it, and let the whole country decorate the morning of its own reckoning. The screen woke, and for a few minutes it was kind. It showed the funny season. the one the public had been sold. Yuto fleeing the crab, Daiki wearing a net like a veil, Erika declaring war on the lighting, Kaito gloriously selling coconuts to 3 separate people who had already gathered their own coconuts, running a small economy on pure confidence. The pavilion laughed, the cast laughed. Even I gave the reel a small, honest smile, because some of it had genuinely been a good time. And a man can hold a grudge and a sense of humor in the same hand if he practices. Beside me, Ren chuckled and murmured, just loud enough for me to hear, "See? It's only a show, husband. It was always only a show." He believed it. That was the last moment he ever would. The reel reached the coconut run, and there I was on the screen, knocking my wife gently into the sand, declining to lift her, saying my hands were full. The audience laughed at it as comedy. Mireille did not. Her hand drifted to the bracelet on her wrist, turning it, the small familiar motion, the tell she had never once managed to stop. Then the reel ended, and the screen went black, and the timer hit 0. And the screen did not bring up the winner's graphic. It hung over the stage like a second moon, and a whole pavilion of beautiful people slowly stopped breathing as 2 words rose out of the dark and refused to move. UNAIRED material. If you have been paying attention, you already know this part. You have seen me standing here, hands in my pockets, the only man in the room who knew what came next. Now you know how I got here. Now we both find out what happens after the screen lights up. Ladies and gentlemen, Dorian said, reading the words off a teleprompter that had clearly just changed on him, his showman voice cracking at the edges. What you are about to see was never meant to air. He had hosted weddings and game shows for 20 years, and for the first time he looked genuinely afraid of his own stage. He did not know what was coming either. Almost no one did. The screen began to play. A summer shower at night, at the dark edge of the island past the linen carts. 2 silhouettes meeting under the water. A kiss held a beat too long for friendship. The pavilion went very quiet, the way a room goes quiet when a joke turns out to be a confession. I watched it move through the cast like a cold front. Daiki's face fell from confusion into a slow, wounded anger, the look of a large, gentle man learning that someone he had cheered for had been lying to a person he liked. Aoi pressed both hands to her mouth. Satoru, for once in his life, was not smiling, because a man who trades in reading people takes no pleasure in watching the amateurs find out he was right. And Renji, sensing the ship was not merely sinking but already gone, slid his chair a careful, telling inch away from the CEO he had spent a week calling his ally. "What is this?" Ren said, and the smooth was gone from his voice already. "What is this?" Nobody answered him. The screen answered him. It cut to the North Trail, Yuto's little action camera, the one he had aimed at a dangerous coconut, looking instead at a man and a woman who thought no one was watching. Mireille's voice came through, small and clear over the pavilion speakers. "He's close. He's collecting coconuts like it's his job." And then Ren's voice, warm and certain and damning. "Then let him. Your husband is exactly where useful husbands belong. Behind you, carrying things, never once looking up." The sound of 300 people inhaling at the same time is a sound I will remember for the rest of my life. Mireille did not move at all. I had watched my wife talk her way out of every corner she was ever backed into, watched her reframe lateness into devotion and coldness into strategy and betrayal into confusion. There is no reframe for your own voice. There is no clever sentence that can unsay the words the whole country has just heard you say. For the first time in 8 years, I watched Mireille run completely out of story. For the first time all season, Ren Amamiya looked like a man who had just discovered that subtitles could betray him. His mouth opened and closed. The famous composure, the boardroom armor, simply fell off him in front of the entire country, and underneath it, there was nothing but a man watching his own voice end his life. Mireille had gone white. Her hand was at the bracelet, frozen, the scratched gold catching the stage lights. Across the country, in a glass office tower, the entire staff of Ren's company stood watching the same feed. The group chat that had spent a fortnight celebrating their CEO's charming reality show run went, all at once, completely silent. The screen was not finished. It cut to the service path on the last night. Audio only, a black screen with 2 voices and a small waveform pulsing as they spoke. Ren's voice, ugly and possessive in the dark. "You forgot who you came here with. You came on my arm. You're mine until I say otherwise." And Mireille's, raw and frightened. "I'm trying not to drown." The pavilion did not laugh. The pavilion did not make any sound at all. On the stage, the man who had spent 2 weeks performing leadership and the woman who had spent 2 weeks performing a marriage sat under the evidence of their own chosen words, and there was nowhere left for either of them to stand. "This is fake," Ren said, lurching to his feet, pointing at the screen, at me, at anyone. "This is manipulation. It's edited, it's deep-faked. This is an attack on me. He did this. The quiet one. He set this whole thing up. He was half right and entirely doomed. And the worst part for him was that I still had not said a single word. I did not have to. That was the entire point, the thing he had never once understood about me. He kept waiting for me to attack so he could call it an attack. I never attacked. I just stopped catching things and let them fall and let everyone watch where they landed. It isn't edited, Mr. Amamiya, a new voice said, calm and cool and absolutely without hurry, from the wings of the stage. It's sequenced. There's a difference, and it matters. My mother walked out onto the stage. The audience did not know her face, but they knew authority when it wore sensible shoes and crossed a stage like it owned the boards, because it did. Reiko Kurosawa stopped beside Dorian, took the microphone from his unresisting hand, and faced the country with the expression of a woman reconciling an account. "My name is Reiko Kurosawa," she said. "I own the production company that makes this program. Every camera on that island answers to me, including a few the contestants were never told about. She let that land. The public broadcast showed you the show. The archives showed you the choice. I simply decided which one you got to see and when." Then she looked at me, and something in her face that the cameras would read as cold and that I read after a lifetime as love. "And this," she said, "is my son, Haruto Kurosawa, the quiet husband your country spent 2 weeks underestimating. He is the heir to everything I just described. He did not come on the island to win a game. He came to find out, with the whole world as his witness, exactly who his wife was when she thought the useful husband wasn't looking." The pavilion erupted and then strangled itself silent. 300 people, rearranging 2 weeks of assumptions in real time. Ren sat down without deciding to. He understood finally that he had not been outmaneuvered by a quiet husband. He had been outmaneuvered by a family, and he had walked onto their board and lunged at their bait and bought the shovel himself. What happened to Ren after that was neither my doing nor my problem, and it happened fast, the way these things do once the first domino is public. A board does not keep a chief executive the whole country has watched call a woman his property. By the time our plane landed, the company had an acting chief, and Ren had a statement his lawyers had clearly written through gritted teeth. He had spent his entire life believing image was power. He got to learn, in high definition, how quickly an image becomes a liability once the truth finally has the better camera. The screen offered its last exhibit, gently, almost kindly. A hotel lobby from 3 months before the island. A date stamp in the corner, a receipt, and a small velvet box on a counter. A thin gold bracelet inside it, the same bracelet currently burning a hole in my wife's wrist. The proof closed its own circle. The gift that had started it all, dated, witnessed, undeniable, the leash with better marketing, finally read aloud to the room. Mireille looked at the bracelet on her wrist as if it had become hot. And then, too late, far too late, with the whole country watching, she clawed it off and dropped it on the stage table in front of her, where it landed with a small, expensive final sound. For 2 weeks she had hidden it, turned it, cleaned its scratches, covered it with napkins and sleeves and her own frightened hand. She could have taken it off at the bonfire when it might have meant something. She took it off now, when it only meant everything was over. "Haruto," she said, and her voice had nothing left in it. No performance, no reframe, just the bare sound of a person who has run out of audience. "Please, say something. Anything. Don't just stand there." She reached even then for the old lever. "We can fix this," she whispered, privately, away from all of this. "You don't have to do it like this, Haruto. Please. Not in front of," she gestured weakly at the country. She still believed the cameras were the problem. She had never once grasped that for me the cameras were the entire point, the witnesses. That meant she could never again rewrite this into something she could live with comfortably. There would be no private version, and that was the gift I was giving us both. So I gave her my last sentence, the one I had been saving since the screen first lit up in my imagination 2 weeks ago. I did not raise my voice. I never have. "I already said everything I needed to," I told her. "I said it the day I got on the yacht instead of staying home with the dog. You just weren't listening. You never were. Goodbye, Mireille." Reiko set a folder on the stage table beside the dropped bracelet, thick and official, and did not need to explain what it was, because everyone in the country could see the word divorce on the tab from the cheap seats. There was no shouting, there was no kneeling. There was only a man standing who had finally put down the last thing he had been carrying for 8 years and discovered it weighed exactly as much as he had always suspected. Dorian, to his enormous credit, remembered he had a job. He took the microphone back from Reiko with shaking hands and turned, on pure professional instinct, to the only clean thing left on his stage, the winner, he managed. We still have a winner. By public vote, the most trusted, most honest contestant of the season. He glanced at the card and, for the first time all night, smiled like he meant it. Rina Tsubaki. Rina stood up, looked at the confetti beginning to fall, looked at the wreckage of the 2 people who had wandered off in every game she ever watched them play, and delivered her acceptance speech in full. Good, she said. I worked. She sat back down. The pavilion, desperate for something uncomplicated to love, gave her the loudest cheer of the night, and she allowed them 1/4 of a smile. Natsumi found me in the chaos afterward, 18 and unsurprised. The only person on the island who had done the arithmetic on the very first night and never once changed her answer. You knew the whole time, she said, not a question. I knew the whole time, I agreed. She nodded, satisfied, and then, because she was still a teenager under all that terrifying clarity, she added, for what it's worth, you were the only adult here who didn't make me lose faith in adults. Coming from Natsumi, that was a standing ovation. Erika got her shot, of course she did, sliding into frame beside me with her phone up. Tell me you'll at least let me document the redemption arc, she said. Suffering this photogenic is wasted off camera. I told her she could have the second seat at whatever came next, the good one, the one with the lighting. A bodyguard who only ever wanted to be near the moment had earned her spot in the shot. They flew us off the island that afternoon. Somewhere over the water, a producer handed me back my phone, the one I had surrendered into a black box a lifetime ago. It lit up with 2 weeks of a world that had been watching, and I scrolled past all of it to the only message that mattered, a photo from the woman my mother had hired to mind my house. It was the dog, asleep on the sofa, fed and walked and entirely indifferent to the fact that his owner had just become a national event. He had missed the whole scandal. He had no idea his name had been an excuse, a clause, a punchline. He was simply, stubbornly fine, and he was, I realized, looking at that photo, the only one of us who had kept a stable relationship through the entire affair. I looked at that picture far longer than I looked at any message from a stranger calling me a hero, because the dog did not think I was a hero. The dog thought I was the man who fed him and came home. That, it turned out, was the only review I had ever actually wanted. 2 weeks of cameras to prove a betrayal, and the cure for the whole of it was a sleeping animal who had never once doubted that I would walk back through the door. I did not go back to the apartment Mireille and I had shared. I did not need the ending to be loud. My mother had a quieter place waiting, with a yard the dog would approve of, and a kitchen that had never once hosted a lie. The divorce moved fast, the way things move when the proof is already public and the lawyers are already yours. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, the waiting. No, a scene is a story she could have rewritten. I wanted to be free, with the whole world as my witness, so she could never tell herself it didn't happen. I got that. I got the truth, told plainly, in front of everyone, by her own voice and her own choices, while I stood there and refused, for once, to carry what was never mine to hold. The screen had shown them the show. The archive had shown them the choice underneath it, the one nobody was ever supposed to see. And I walked off that island the way I had walked onto the yacht, calmly, on my own feet, owing no one an explanation, with a dog waiting and a life beginning, and the very last word being, for the first time in 8 years, mine.
Haruto wins because he understands psychology better than everyone around him. He never gives Ren or Mireille the emotional explosion they expect. He stays calm, lets silence create pressure, asks short questions that force people to reveal themselves, and chooses public moments where lies cannot escape the room. That is the useful lesson here. When someone tries to manipulate you, the strongest answer is not always anger. Sometimes it is patience, evidence, timing, and the discipline to let people expose their own motives. Haruto shows that self-respect becomes powerful when you stop reacting on command and start controlling the frame.